Everybody, welcome back to another episode of Podcakes. I really appreciate you putting that kickstand down and spending some time with us today. Today's guest is a remarkable woman. Her name is Lauren with Ride My Road. Her main passion and Ride My Road's purpose is to bring awareness and help stop human sex trafficking and human trafficking in general. It is a very intense conversation, and I learned so much about what is going on out there in the world. What I thought trafficking was to what it actually is so far night and day. I had no idea. Not only are we going to learn about Lauren today and where she grew up, but also how she got into motorcycles and ultimately getting into this line of work. And we'll keep this pretty short. If you like what we're doing here, please take a minute, go over to Patreon, Motorcycles and Pancakes, and become a Patreon member today. You'll get some extra perks. It's $2.99 a month, super cheap, and it just helps this channel to make cameras and mics and get up here with epic sceneries and just all that stuff, and it's greatly, greatly appreciated. Friends, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like, subscribe, share, go down, leave us a comment, even if it's only one word. And if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, do the same thing. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you enjoy this episode by liking it, and also leave us a subscription. A subscription? No. Leave us a comment down below, even if it's only that one word. That one word just kicks the algorithm, and if you want to write us a book and tell us how good or bad we're doing, I would greatly appreciate that. So friends, without further ado, here's Lauren with Ride My Road. All right, well, let's just get this thing rolling then.
Sounds good.
Right. Well, thank you for coming. This has been a year in the making,
Yeah.
at least. You and I met 2023 at Giant Loop. And I remember you pulled up and it was a little bit windy and you're trying to set your tent up.
It was,
And
sorry, go ahead.
I was like, I'm going to go over there and at least hold down the corners, right?
Yeah.
And I did that, and you and I were just chatting and helped you put up your tent. And we're like, okay. Went back over there, and everybody's like, she has a boyfriend, right? And I'm like, I was literally helping somebody with the tent. Leave me alone.
But I don't have a boyfriend. I didn't have a boyfriend.
That's what I was
And
being
even when I
told.
had a boyfriend, people didn't know that. So that's like a weird thing that people just said that to you.
Yeah. Thanks, critter. I'll throw you
Yeah.
under the bus right there.
Well, I had just got caught in that like 20 minutes of downpour.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was wet all weekend because my gear never dried out.
Oh, man.
I know.
Yeah, that was a rando, just absolute downpour for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like I rode for 5 hours, and then the very last 20 minutes just totally like douched. It was just awful.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah. It's kind of like the story of my life.
Well,
Just
we'll
if
get
there's
into it.
rain, I'm riding through it.
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited to hear more about your like moto adventures and places that you've been, but of course we can't go there right now,
Okay.
so we got to step back a little bit. So why don't we just throw it over to you a little bit and tell us a little bit about little Lauren growing up and where you grew up and, all that kind of fun stuff.
All the way back.
All the way back. Yeah.
I grew up in the first 6 years of my life in New Mexico. And then after that, Alaska,
Okay.
where I went through first grade through 12th.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I went abroad for a long time, almost 10 years. Spent some time in Florida. Came to Oregon about 11 years ago, and been here ever since.
Okay. So
Oregon.
the fun thing is that I really enjoy is a lot of people will do exactly what you just said. Like, yeah, so I did this, and this, but it's like we skipped over so much.
Yeah.
So Alaska.
Uh-huh.
Tell me a little bit about that. Did you know Nathan Pan when he was up there?
It's so funny when people hear you're from Alaska, they're like, "Do you know this person?"
I know.
Sometimes you actually do. So
Right. Yeah, it's not like it's a little state though.
yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad's a petroleum engineer, so we moved up there for that. And
What part?
Eagle River, it's outside of Anchorage.
Okay.
And it was just like pretty idyllic. Like I would just hike mountains behind my house to do my homework at the top, and a lot of camping, a lot of hiking, just being outside, freezing. Yeah, it was a really great childhood up there.
So how old were you when you moved up there?
6.
You're 6. And then when did you move back down?
Well, I left my between my junior and senior year of high school. I was 17 and I went to Guatemala
Oh, wow.
to spend a couple of weeks there with my uncle who was the photojournalism professor at New Mexico State.
Mhm.
And he used to take students down there, and he photographs like the hybrid religions of the Guatemalan highlands, like black and white Hasselblad style. And he took me down there. I ended up staying for 5 or 6 months. I didn't go back to school. I missed the first semester of my senior year.
Oh, wow.
I became fluent in Spanish, and I just, like he left after 3 weeks, and I just stayed. I moved in with, like, a family, and I went to language school and just, like, traveling on the weekends, backpacking to, like, Honduras and stuff and Belize, and then I
This is so rad because I'm like, I'm trying to get back to Alaska, but the
Oh,
more you
yeah.
talk, I'm just like,
Yeah.
"Are you kidding? This is fascinating. I had
Yeah.
no idea."
It was I was like, I was lucky that my parents, recognized my spirit. I was kinda like, dying on the vine in high school, just, like, ready to move on, and, wasn't like a bad student or anything. I had a lot of friends. I just felt like there was more for me, and I think my dad was really wise to call his brother and say like, "Hey, you gotta take her take her down there with you."
He's like, "Yeah, you gotta take this one."
Yeah, they were really great in that way,
Yeah.
and, yes, I did come back. I came back in December and then did a full schedule and 3 college classes and graduated on time with my class, and then immediately went abroad, and from there, I lived in Venezuela and Spain and Brazil, and then my parents actually went abroad at that same time. My dad, opened up a consulting firm for petroleum engineering, and they spent the next 15 years abroad. Every year to 2 years, they would change countries. So I'm, like, on this side of the globe, they're on that side of the globe, and then I'd visit them. So, yeah, I've gotten to go kinda all over the world. I know you wanna talk about Alaska.
I don't know where to go right now. This is just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I knew you traveled a little bit, but I had no idea you
Yeah,
did this kinda stuff.
I was like a little, I wanna say like a little hippie kid, like, just backpacking through Central America and going to school all over and,
Yeah.
like, braids in my hair and, bracelets and rings on every finger.
Oh, you're that one. Okay. That's kinda cool.
Yeah.
So okay, let's go back to Alaska.
To
Alright.
Alaska.
So, when you were growing up, did you do, like, any sports or anything like that?
Yeah, I did, taekwondo my whole life.
Holy moly.
Yeah, so I
Okay.
started that at 6 and went all the way through, basically 18, 19.
Yeah.
Got my 3rd degree black belt, and that was kinda my main deal. I did, like, a lot of, summer trainings, and I went to the Junior Olympics a couple times and, just competed a lot. It was just kinda my life, but I also ran track and did dance, and yeah, it's just
I'm a little dumbfounded at the moment.
yeah, I just did stuff. I don't know, I've just always kinda been that person. I
Yeah.
just do stuff.
I think that's pretty rad,
Yeah,
honestly. Um, so going through so about 17 is when you bounced out of Alaska.
yeah.
So you still continue to taekwondo elsewhere?
Yeah, I tried it. I went to, I did end up in Olympia, Washington I did my 1st year of college abroad, and then I came back. I had to come to the United States at some point and, like, do college here, and, so I did a year and a quarter at the Evergreen State College in Olympia, and I found a studio there, and I was doing a little bit of taekwondo. Yeah. And then I graduated, and then I, kinda went back abroad.
Went back abroad. So when you left down into Guatemala and you're living down there, what was that experience like for you? Because you're getting from, I mean, almost quite literally polar opposites,
Yeah, that's
right?
true. Yeah,
So you're going from the wonderful weather of
yeah.
being cold all the time, and then now you're in basically tropical.
No, well, yeah, the highlands are cold.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
Guatemala highlands were very cold. But, yeah, I don't know, they called me Pinguina, like a little penguin, and I'm like, "Well, there's no penguins in Alaska," but it kinda
Yeah.
stuck. Yeah, that experience was, I mean, it set the precedent for my whole life because I did get thrown into, ex you know, seeing extreme poverty, civil war. They'd just gone through, like, a genocide in the '90s. This was 2000, and, yeah, just seeing seeing that level of destitution and political unrest, and, I think it just really, I couldn't go back to college and, like, get excited about going to the mall, you know?
Oh yeah.
So I think it was kind of a separation from my peers in a way. Some of my closest friends understood that experience, and I still am best friends with some of my friends from growing up. But yeah, it made me feel different, I think, and it made me look at the world a lot different. And I think ultimately it's why I do the work I do today, which
Right.
is way down the line. So I won't skip ahead.
That's right. Way down the line.
Yeah.
I have a small experience with kind of that extreme poverty is probably around the same time, early 2000s, like 2000, 2002 or something. My dad and I, with a couple of buddies, we went down to Mexico City and then we went down to climb Pico de Orizaba, big 18,000, like 500 or 600
Is that
foot.
in
Well,
Mexico?
yeah. And we went down there to climb that, but there was a national park. I forget the name of it, but we ended up climbing like a 14,000-foot peak to kind of acclimate. And it was terrible weather in the
Mm,
morning, cold and snowy and everything. So here's all of us with our billboard for North Face, right? All of our fancy gear and everything. We leave the parking lot. And I remember we were hiking up this trail. We went through this little village, and it was just shacks. It was like that extreme poverty. And
mhm,
like it's cold and there's gaps in the boards and stuff going into the house. And you're just like, yeah,
mhm.
I'm probably wearing this jacket is more than they make in how many years. And I remember feeling kind of like new perspectives, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
very new perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the highlands of Guatemala.
Yeah.
So you're the penguin.
Yeah.
Yep.
Pinguina.
So cruising around through there, what was some of like a highlight that when you think of that, like this is the memory that pops up?
Well, I think, like, really becoming fluent in Spanish. So my dad's mom, my grandma, was Mexican. The whole family's Mexican, and they came over into Texas, and, Spanish was my dad's first language.
Okay.
And then when he was 10, his mom died in a car accident, and he lost the language. And so when I heard that story, it kinda really broke my heart. I remember just being, like, 13, 14, and I got to go down to Dallas and meet all of his mom had 13 siblings, and I got to meet, like, a lot of them, and I just felt like there was, like, a broken link, and so that's why I dedicated myself to learn Spanish. And so I think for me, I'm fluent now, and because starting at 17 and just living abroad for so many years and in, Spain and Venezuela and Guatemala, and, that was, like, a real powerful thing for me, I think, as, like, a person to reconnect with my heritage and my dad's heritage and kind of fix that broken link a little bit. So that's kinda, like, just one of the things that I'm really proud of it about that time was, like, "I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna learn this," and then I did, and, you know.
I think that at 13, learning that and feeling like you having that overwhelming like
Yeah.
sadness or
Mhm.
whatever about missing that link and
Mhm.
then doing something about it. And at such a young age to be kind of, in tune with yourself like that.
Mhm.
I think is pretty fascinating because a lot of people at that age are just like, "Oh my god, what's on TikTok right now?" Like, "Oh my god," right?
Well, there was no TikTok
Right, right.
TikTok back in the day, but yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, I don't know, I just felt that deeply. We just listened to a lot of music growing up in the house and,
Yeah.
like, a lot of Linda Ronstadt, and she had those, Spanish albums. Like, I didn't even know Linda Ronstadt sang in English till, like, 15 years ago.
Okay, because I didn't know she sung in
She has
Spanish.
she has, these beautiful Spanish albums, Mexican folklore songs, and
Okay.
so anyways, yeah. We listened to, like, a lot of Cuban music and Cuban, folk songs, and I don't know, it was just something I always felt was missing.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love music.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a big part of my life, so
yeah.
it's just like all the
But you
different
listen to,
facets.
like, death metal and stuff, right?
Well, I mean, I'm not gonna say no. Yeah, I listen to the heavy stuff
Yeah.
for sure, but I mean, growing up, music has just been huge in my life, even before I started playing it.
Mhm.
I mean, I remember just growing up and just loving different facets of it,
Yeah.
and going to the symphony with my mom and stuff was always something I was just like, oh, love this stuff.
Beautiful.
And she introduced me to Victor Borga. I don't know if you know who he is.
I don't.
He's passed away like decades ago, but he was essentially like a musician comedian. And so he would come on, and we're going off on a tangent there, but
Okay.
just if you're ever interested, Victor Borge,
Okay.
YouTube him, and it's the wholesome kind of comedy because it's
Uh-huh.
back then, but it's funny.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, send me your favorites.
absolutely. Yeah, we'll definitely do it. I'll even link it down on the bottom here.
Put it in the show notes.
That's right. That's awesome. So Guatemala, and then where'd you go from there?
I went to Spain. I did a semester in Spain.
Okay, question before we get too far.
Uh-huh.
How did you do that? You're just like Guatemala? Did you just like
Well,
was it the school and you're just
yeah,
like,
it
okay.
was so I after I came home from Guatemala, I knew I wanted to go abroad.
Hmm.
And that's kind of where mentioned that I felt like different because like a lot of my friends were like looking at sororities in like,
Oh yeah.
you know, Colorado and stuff. And I just, so I found out that I think it's maybe the only school, at least at the time, that would let you go abroad as a freshman was the University of Minnesota.
Oh,
So I
okay.
applied, never went to Minnesota for college. I've been there, but never went there. And they let me go. They had a program in Venezuela. So I went there first, and then they had a program in Spain. And so I went there next. And
Wow.
after that, that was when I was like, okay, I probably need to come back to the United States. I didn't want to go to Minnesota. And my best friend from high school, Leah, she was already going to the Evergreen State College in Olympia.
Mhm.
And it's a really unique college. They sort of let you choose your curriculum. You have sort of a focus, and there's no grades. There's like evaluations.
Huh,
And
okay.
so I knew that I wanted to continue to study about social justice and international relations and uh, things like that. And so I went there. And so that's when I went to Olympia, Washington after Spain. And then I always took the max credit. So I graduated college in 2 years. And so I just did a year and a quarter at Olympia, and then I was done with school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, you said first Venezuela,
Hmm.
and so that was what year? Because they had
2001. No, 2000. I'm sorry. I graduated college, high school in 2001. It was 2000. Yeah, 2001,
okay.
the fall.
So, trying to think of their timeline, they were still, I think, went on the downward slope then, right?
It was insane.
Yeah.
When I first moved there, it was like 736 bolivares to $1, which is their currency. And when I left, it was like 6,000
Oh,
bolivares for
okay.
the US dollar.
Mhm.
So it's like really, really bad economic. They tried that coup on Chavez. There was the oil embargo, not the embargo, there was the oil strike. Yeah, it's just like you're just lined up for food and water. And it was very violent. When I lived there, Caracas was the murder capital of the world next to Baghdad at the time.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was gnarly. It was a different kind of extreme from Guatemala.
I bet.
Yeah.
So, what was that like getting down there and getting in kind of that violent kind of environment? Were you ever, like, worried for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I got kidnapped at gunpoint, carjacked at gunpoint.
I'm
that was
sorry, what?
yeah, yeah, that was nuts.
Um That is crazy. You're the second person I know abroad that got kidnapped.
Well, I wouldn't say kidnapped. So
Yeah.
we did get carjacked. So I did have a boyfriend there at the time. Ended up staying because I met a guy and
Yeah.
fell in love and everything. And so then I went back after college and I lived there for a long time.
Okay.
So after college, um, yeah, we were driving to drop his sister off at her apartment. It was nighttime, and I'm sitting in the front seat. My my boyfriend's nephew was in the back seat, and he had got out to like help her carry the baby out. And then a car pulls in front, and then a car pulls behind, and I'm just kind of like watching as this guy like comes up with a gun, and my boyfriend's coming back to the car, and he just like slams him on the hood, and yeah, it was crazy. And
Jesus,
then
terrifying.
yeah, so then he came around and tried to get in the car, and I had locked the door, and then, he he yelled at me, and I unlocked it, and then I stepped out of the door, and then I opened the back seat, and I told David, like, "Get out of here." So, like, the little kid, he was 7, he, like, ran to his other aunt, and then he pointed the gun at me, and he was like, "Get back in the car." So, he made me get in the passenger seat, he put my boyfriend in the back seat, and then he got in the car, and we drove away, and I was like, "This is it." Like, this is not gonna end well. And then there's a car in front and a car behind, and, he's screaming at me like, "Why'd you lock the door?" And I'm just like, thinking like, "Man, I hope he doesn't find out I'm American," because what happens is they call them secuestros express, so they're express kidnappings where they will take you for 24 to 48 hours. They'll drain all your bank accounts, ransoms, all of that stuff happens. They'll even, like, if you live there, they'll take you to your home and they rob your entire home, like, it's very severe, and I was like, "This is it, this is" you know, and, they drove us around because carjackings are so common that they actually have on their fob. So, like, when you're driving in Venezuela and your fob beeps, you have to put in the code or the engine will shut down.
Okay.
So he drove us around for a while until that happened, and then he asked my boyfriend for the code, and then he put it in, and once he found out that we weren't lying, you know, he, eventually pulled over and kicked us out, and we were just like, "Ugh," like, it couldn't have gone better, honestly. No one got hurt. They took the car.
Yeah, well, big
And
deal.
then I had this, like, little purse,
Mhm.
and it was, like, here at the side, and I had, my my license and stuff in there. I didn't travel with my passport, but, when I got out of the car, I just kinda went like this and, like, put it on my shoulder, like, got out, and so I managed to keep that. I didn't just my ID and everything. I was just, like, worried they would find out I was American, because then you're really targeted for ransoms and stuff like that.
Holy hell bags.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
talk about
insane.
adrenaline. I couldn't sleep for, like, 2 nights. It was just like, "Ugh."
I couldn't even imagine.
But what I remember distinctly about that experience is I was, like, pretty shook up.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. And my boyfriend and his family and his nephew who was 7, they were just, like, honestly fairly cool about it because you do when you live, I think, in chaos, your nervous system sort of adjusts, and for me, that was, like, insane, and for them, that's life. And I just remember, like, okay, being confronted with my privilege, like, once again. I'm like, if that happened to a kid in America, he'd be like he'd be in therapy for, like, who knows how long,
Right.
but, like, not there.
That's just
I
crazy.
know.
It just goes back to, first world problems, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was nuts. But yeah, a lot of yeah.
Okay. Well,
Oh, yeah, he had, like, the gun pointed in my stomach the whole time. Like, he was, like, driving and, like yeah,
that's kinda
I
scary.
know. I wrote a poem about it. It was called "Pistol in My Belly."
You still have it?
Probably.
Probably.
I write a lot of, like, little poems and stuff.
Oh, man. Well, if you have it, send it to me. Put it in the show notes.
Put it in the show notes. I think I would be too embarrassed for that.
Oh, come on now. That's absolutely crazy because, kind of my perception of Venezuela, it's just exactly what you just kinda said right
Yeah,
there,
like, there was, like, 54 murders a day on average. Like, it was nuts.
Man.
It's totally nuts. And now it's like, honestly, it's completely destabilized. It's
Yeah.
worse and
Yeah.
yeah.
Insane. So, Venezuela, there it is. Where'd you go from there? Oh, you went back up
I
north?
went to Olympia
Yeah, I
after that,
went to
and then I went
Olympia.
back to Venezuela, so I was in and out of Venezuela for 8 years.
Okay.
That relationship lasted 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's kinda cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, sure.
yeah.
Uh, so then what was the next part of your life then?
I went to Florida. My parents had, they were still abroad, but they bought a property in Florida. They bought a mobile home park, actually,
Oh, okay.
and so I went there on and off and worked there, managed it.
Did you have a golf cart?
No, I didn't. It wasn't that big. It was 17 acres, and I think 11 of it was developed.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's kinda cool.
That was another, I think, another kinda not turning point, but another experience in my life that sort of deepened my work today. Like, then to come home and sort of see, like, what like, low income in the United States and, like, how hard that is, and you think, like, "Oh, it's America, you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps," but then seeing, like, the reality of, like, if you grew up in a home where there's, like, no one's doing laundry or feeding you or, you know,
Yeah.
taking you to school, like, you don't you don't have the same opportunity. Like, it's not the same, so it's not so black and white, and so kinda going abroad and then coming home and seeing, like, low income and, like, trying to help, like, let's get street lights in here, and let's actually get some good electricity and make sure that these homes aren't burning down and stuff like that was, like, my next kind of the next chunk of my life. My early 20s was working in that arena.
So you kind of just found it like an advocacy space, essentially.
Yeah,
That's kind of
yeah.
how did I mean? So trying to have all these questions all of a sudden, but
Mhm.
it's like to be able to do something like that. How did you go about like you were saying like putting streetlights and you had to get electricians in there to change out
Yeah.
the homes and everything. How did that kind of come about?
Well, I mean, so my parents bought this mobile home park and went in partnership with they had a partner, and so I just ran it. They weren't there, so partners were in Alaska, they were abroad, and so I became just like the manager, and it was just like a job, you just go and you see what needs to be done and how do you take care of this place, and that's actually when I started my first business, refurbishing mobile homes, put them on the property and have people move in, and then your return on investment's like 4 months or something.
Jeez.
Yeah, and then I had, like, 5 or 6, and then it was like I was just making passive income, and then also just, like, having pride in that, like, a lot of mobile home parks, like, they are like slumlords, and just, like, making sure that that wasn't the case where we were, and making the homes nice and safe, and so that was my first company.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah,
And your ROI in just a few months
I know,
is
it's kind of
pretty
insane.
awesome.
I don't think you can get mobile homes for that price now. I don't know.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking like as a business guy too, it's like
Mhm.
anytime you hear somebody getting ROI, it's back so quickly. It's just like,
Yeah,
what?
I know.
That's pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
It was great, and then I was doing all the work myself, so
Yeah,
yeah.
that's even better.
I spent a lot of time in Home Depot.
I bet. So how long did you do that for?
Let's see, probably, I don't know, 5, 6 years.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's a minute.
And then I was in and out. I would, like, they would come into town, and then I would leave and go abroad again, and I don't know, it was just like a real transient kind of decade.
So when you knew that mom and dad were coming in for a while and you're getting that a little bit, I'm sure like the wanderlust, right? And like
Yeah, for
it's
sure, I
time to go
definitely
again.
had that. I had
W-
that big time.
Were you just like, I'm going here?
Yeah.
Where was that?
Well, like, just backpacked through Central America or, um, I don't know, I went everywhere.
That's so
I
awesome.
haven't spent much time in Asia, but and, like, I did a little bit of Africa, but, like, Central South America, Europe,
Oh man,
yeah.
that's pretty rad. So you just kind of like, I'm gonna go here
Mhm.
and just do it.
Yeah.
Where was your first big backpacking trip?
So I should be more clear. I backpacked through Central America, but you have your backpack and then you're, like, catching chicken buses and stuff.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
not like I wasn't, like, hiking through it.
Hmm.
But, yeah, that was kinda the big one. I spent a month, and I just, like, made my way from I think I flew into Guatemala, went up through Mexico, and then made my way down to Panama.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and over the course of a month.
That's pretty legit.
Yeah.
That's
I was, like, 24 or something.
it was all by yourself?
I was with my boyfriend at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, same guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same duder.
Yep.
That's pretty cool.
Yep.
And he was able to keep up with you because it sounds like you're pretty like, let's go.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. He was Venezuelan, so he was like, he thought it was pretty cool,
Yeah.
you know? So,
Had somebody there to kind of knew the culture and stuff too.
not really, it's totally different.
Is it really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Like, Venezuela is nothing like Mexico, or I mean, the
Yeah.
Caribbean countries are, yeah, they eat different, they talk different, they have different cultural norms, different, yeah. And all those little countries are like that. They got their own little pockets of lifestyle.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously never been down there yet. I
Yeah.
emphasize on yet.
Yet.
Yeah. My wanderlust radar is exploding right now.
Yeah, well, you're in a new phase of life.
That's true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do your podcast guests know about okay.
No.
Did I just ruin it?
No. My friends know and everything, but
Okay.
those who know, they know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I will just say I'm not a business owner anymore. Let's just leave it at that.
You can edit that out, right, if you didn't
I don't care about editing.
Yeah.
It's all fun.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, we should edit that swear word out. I'm like, why?
Oh, yeah.
It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
It's a big boy podcast, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so what was your favorite trip that you've done? Like just the backpacking style? Are they all just a little bit different? There's not one that you can just be like, this one was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, they're all that's such a hard question. Everywhere has, like, their really beautiful parts, and,
Yeah.
like, even Venezuela, I know I was, like, saying how the crime and everything, but It's one of the most beautiful countries in the world. They have like, we have Denali in Alaska. It's like the
Mhm.
tallest mountain in North America. They have like 17 peaks that are taller in the Andes.
Oh, wow,
They're
yeah.
gorgeous.
Mhm.
And they have the Caribbean beaches, and it's just yeah.
It's a pretty good mixture of everything.
Yeah, they pretty much have everything from like wetlands to beach to alpine stuff, and yeah,
That
got it all. The plains. Yeah.
Yeah. So out of all the countries you've lived in, which one, if you had to leave right now, which one would you wanna go back to and live, say, a year?
I just can't. Like, this is the
That's
hardest
the
question
same
ever.
thing, right?
Yeah. Well, some friends of mine from high school, some good friends of mine, they're moving to Spain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're out of here like next month. He's been working for a year and a half to like make it happen, and I'm like that could be pretty nice.
Yeah, that would be
Just
pretty
kind of chill. Yeah.
pretty rad for sure.
Portugal's like real popular for people.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I gotta get abroad.
Yeah.
That's really what it is. Like I said, my wanderlust on writing
Yeah.
is what I wanna do, some
Yeah.
more writing and stuff, and of course, it's always, the Ushuaia. I gotta get down there at some
Mhm.
point, you know?
Yeah.
I
I
gotta
haven't
ride
been there.
down there.
Yeah, you should ride down there.
Yeah, that's the thing. I had, Alex Chacon, he stayed over here, months ago, maybe last summer, so maybe close to a year ago. He
Mhm.
was over here for a minute, and, um, he was talking about all of his trips and stuff, and he was just like, "Yeah, if you go down there, you let me know.
Yeah.
I will I'll let you know where to go and how to
Yeah.
get down there and maybe the better routes and stuff." I'm
That's
like,
awesome.
"I'm all about it, man.
Yeah.
Let's do that."
That sounds great.
Yeah, for sure. So, we kinda got a little bit of the backstory, and it's so full. I mean, we could do
Mhm.
an episode just on probably every country you've been in. But, at what point in your life were you like, "Hmm, these motorcycle things are kinda cool?"
Yeah. It's I've, like, lived a lot of life, and my main regret is that I didn't start writing earlier.
Yeah,
Because when I was in high school in Alaska, I was 14, and my dad said, "Let's get you a motorcycle," because he grew up riding, and you could get your motorcycle permit at 14 in Alaska, and he's like, "You could ride to school," and, like, none of my friends had their license. We didn't have our licenses yet, and I just remember, like, looking at him and being like, "Dad, that is not cool." And I think it's like, that thing when you are young and you're like,
yeah,
that would make me different, and I'm not ready to be different yet,
yeah.
and I told him, like, "That's, like, so dumb."
That happens all the time with that camera.
It's dead.
It just hates life. Don't buy GoPro. Mm,
Busted.
yep. Anyways.
Yeah, so that's, like, my one big regret of my life that I
Mhm,
didn't get my license at 14, but I did get it at 21, so
okay.
wasn't that much longer.
Right.
Yeah, this is actually my I'm 41, this is my 20-year ride-iversary.
Radiversary. Well, happy Radiversary.
Thank you.
That's pretty rad.
Yeah.
Pretty rad. So 21, and did it just start becoming kind of a commuter thing, or is it just like I'm going to start traveling on this thing right now?
Um, I can't remember exactly. It was just yeah, we were in Florida, my parents were in and out, and it just came up, and I just did it. My dad and I drove across the state to get a used, Ducati Monster 750. It was red, and then he
Nice.
rode it home, and I followed him in the pickup or in the SUV or whatever, and, I started learning. And yeah, it was, like, pretty quick that we started moto camping, like, within probably 2 months.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I got my license, and then I was on that. He had a bunch of bikes at that time. I think he was, like, probably riding his Guzzi, and we just started going. So we that first summer, we went from Jacksonville or St. Augustine, Florida, like, across the state and then through Alligator Alley and down to mile marker 0 at Key West, and
Mhm.
I think it was like an 1,100-mile trip, and I was done, I was hooked, like, that's just what we did. So, he was working rotation, he was working 3 weeks in Trinidad and Tobago, and then he'd come home into Florida for 3 weeks. And so when he was home, we would just go.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So we kind of went all over. We did we went all the way up through Canada, through up to Riviera de Loup, which is the other side of the north tip of Maine, and then came on back down. And then one time we went, like we'd just be like, "Oh, let's go to Alabama. Let's go to the Barber Museum." And then one time we went all the way to the Grand Canyon and then back, and we just rode together. We were like little road warriors.
Isn't that the coolest?
It's the coolest.
Yeah.
And like there wasn't really like really well-made women's moto gear. So for like the first year I wore my snowboarding gear from Alaska.
Yeah.
And we just put like all our junk in like white plastic bags and then like bungeed the shit out of it. Like just like no real like luggage system. And yeah, we just did that. We would just ride and ride and ride and ride and ride together. And we'd camp and then we'd ride and ride and yeah. My dad's like to this day one of my best friends. So
Right.
yeah, we just have always done stuff together and yeah.
Did you still ride together?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
My dad and I do a lot of riding
I
together.
know your dad's the best.
Yeah,
What a
it's
sweet
so cool.
guy.
Just
Pancakes.
Papa cakes. It's good just to roll around and have them on the comms and stuff.
Yeah.
Because our parents have a different perspective on just everything with just a different generation and everything. And one of the things I always enjoy about my dad is you'll be on comms and we'll just be riding like I've said this before. You get over in like Eastern Oregon or something, and you just ride along. He's like, yeah. So you see that cutout on the side of the hill over there? Like, yeah. He's like, well, that's actually the Oregon Trail, and this happened, and then they went over here, and you're just like, you and I would just be like, oh, just whatever.
I love your dad voice.
Thank you. It's great riding with them. Just sucks when they crash. So, anyways,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Too soon?
Too soon?
Yeah, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Glad you guys are okay.
Yeah. Yeah. If you want to know more about that podcast before this one, we talk about it. Cash debrief. So, um, so you guys still ride.
Mhm.
So you guys were in Florida. You rode all over. What was like kind of one of the highlights? Like the first time you went somewhere. Like obviously you said you went down like Key West and everything. You were hook, line, and sinkered right there. Like,
Yep.
dude, this is it. I love this. And then was there another part where you were just like, because I think everybody has that realization of like, I don't know if it's the feeling of a temperature change or a smell or something when you're out there riding. You just don't get in a car. But like I know for me, every once in a while, especially if I'm like by myself, even, and I'm just riding, and you get that sensation change, whatever it is, and you're just like, yeah, this is awesome. You're just like, this is why we're doing it.
Yeah.
It's not always, it is the visuals, but sometimes it's just that,
Sensation.
yeah, the sensation where you're just like, this is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember particularly. I mean, going across Alligator Alley in Florida was like, okay, this is cool because you are out there and you can smell the swamp and
Hmm.
the signs of like alligator crossing. And then then you go across that 7 mile bridge.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just remember I just wrote a thing about this, but I just remember being like, it feels so normal and also so unnatural. Like you're strapped to like a rocket and you're just like,
Yeah.
are we supposed to be as humans? Like, are we supposed to be like sitting on a flammable tank of gas going 100 miles an hour? Like, it's just wild.
You've gone 100 miles an hour. I've never been over 55.
Yeah, good one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just think that sensation of like it feels natural and also like otherworldly in a way.
Right. I heard it described once that a lot of the people that do a lot of the motorcycle riding and kind of wander, kind of like you do, and I loosely do, I say, they're the modern day cowboys, right? They're just out there wandering around on their steel horse, right?
Mm-hmm.
The old
Yeah.
Bon Jovi cliche, but
Yeah.
it's kind of I can't remember exactly where I heard that, but I remember going, huh, kinda, right? I guess the motorcycle is our horse, if you will,
Yeah.
taking us to some pretty rad spots.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? There's those who stay by the campfire and those who
Right.
go beyond or whatever that is. That's a pretty strong narrative in my family, the Trantham family,
Mm-hmm.
that like that kind of Wild West spirit, I think, is really strong. The Tranthams came from England, and then they were in the Virginia area, and then like the mythology is that the bad Tranthams went west.
Okay.
And that's kind of where I come from. It's like just wild, like just.
Well, it makes a lot of sense, right? So, I mean, if that's true, then I mean, obviously you're going to have that wanderlust, you know?
Yeah, and then I just grew up reading a lot of like Louis L'Amour, like old Western, that kind of thing. Like a lot of I think my morals and my views on life come from that attitude of like, you get out there, you do your best, you be a good person, you do things right, you stick up for people. Like all that stuff comes from like those books I read. But we read them as a family. Like my dad was reading them, I was reading them, my brother was reading them. Like it was just like, it's kind of like a big thing. But yeah, that wandering and that kind of lust for life.
Yeah. It's the new experiences. Yeah. And I think for me, part of the reason I was a truck driver for so long is kind of that same thing. You know, we're just kind of going everywhere, right? And you're experiencing new things. And I like there's two ways to do it. You can plan the pee breaks, or you could just be like, I'm just going today.
Yeah.
Right. And so like my dad and I, we're kind of that way too. He plans everything, and you get to see a lot of things I would just normally ride by.
Yeah.
You know, but sometimes I get to an intersection, I'm like left, look right, look left, look right. I don't know, I'm going left. I hope there's fuel down there.
Yeah.
Right. So that's very, I think it's part of my core, you know, is just being out there and just wandering around, you know, and it's the same thing in trucks, you know, like everybody's like, where are you going to end up tonight? And like, I don't know.
Yeah.
About halfway to 2/3 through my day, that's where I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But other than that, I'll let you know later.
Yeah, I think bikers have that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I just love being out and around and not knowing where I'm at.
Yeah.
And new experiences and new places and finding those little epic camp spots that you would never find. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. Nothing better.
Nothing more gooder. Yeah. So once you guys started traveling a little bit more on your motorcycles, where's the next place you moved to that you rode a lot?
I went to Oregon.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, at some point I upgraded the 750 to the Ducati Monster 998.
Okay.
It's the S4RS. They only made it for 2 years. It's fancy. That was my next bike, and I pretty much rode that till I guess 2022 when I got my desert sled. But I moto camped the shit out of that Ducati Monster. Like, it's the most impractical bike, and I just rode it everywhere and camped, and that was my deal.
That's awesome. When did you find out that there was actually good gear out there to buy?
I mean, it was a slow evolution, specifically for women.
Yeah.
I mean, there was always some luggage out there, but I mean, I got connected with Giant Loop in 2016, and I never looked back.
Yeah.
As far as luggage system goes, but as far as gear for women, like, it's been a slow evolution and just gotten better and better, thankfully.
As far as I know, and obviously I'm not a woman, but to me it seems like Revit's been kind of the one pushing the women's gear. Yeah,
I have Revit gear. I like them.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it depends on what style of riding you're doing, but
that's true.
Yeah.
They don't make full leathers.
Yeah, exactly. I'm good on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty rad. So you've been Giant Loop since 2016. So that was almost, well, they've been around for a few years at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. 8
years ago.
That's pretty good. And how did that come out? Were you just buying stuff, or were you already just traveling enough to where they noticed you?
No, not at all. It's actually the other part of my story of my work. I was decided to take on this project of traveling and photographing survivors of human trafficking.
Right.
And I had this mission. I wanted to do this project, and I'm really grateful for my dad because he's always pushing me to like put myself out there. And he actually found Giant Loop. I don't know how. And I needed a luggage system for the bike. And he said, well, this company's in Bend. You should just ride them and see if they'll give you something. And I'm always like, they're not going to give me anything. Like, I'm nobody. Like, he's always pushed me to like just take chances and like, what's the worst that could happen? And so I sent an email, And at the time, Greg, I don't know if you know Greg Scavalis.
Yeah.
He's
I
with
know who he is.
Yeah, he's with BDR now. He wrote me back, and then I can't remember when Harold got involved, but they just said I didn't have any followers. Like, this was the beginning of this project, so this wasn't about like publicity for them. They just liked the project, and they sent me a box, and it had everything in it.
Holy crap!
Like everything and then some.
Yeah.
And that's why I love Giant Loop so much to this day, is because Harold and those guys over there, like, they just support cool projects, and they've been a big supporter of the nonprofit. And
You know, I'll contest to Harold and just the human that he is.
Yeah.
It's like every time I've been around him, I'm just like, this dude is something else.
Yeah.
And then I hear stories like yourself, and there's other ones out there where they just go above and beyond.
Totally.
And I didn't get a box, but I bought my granddaughter a little electric motorcycle for Christmas, right? And it looked like the AT-AT.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, this looks like it. So I like stickered it up, like my bike, put all my friends' stickers on it and got it in there. And I sent Giant Loop an email like, hey, do you have a used little bag or whatever, and this is what I want, So they sent, I forget, the handlebar bag.
The zigzag.
The zigzag bag. And I got an email that just said, a package on the way from Santa.
Oh,
and I was just like,
so cute.
And it's on her, because she likes, it's her treasure bag.
Yeah.
Because she likes to pick up little cool rocks and things and put them in there.
I was just going to say, for rocks. It's got to be for rocks.
Exactly. So I don't know how much are in there, or whatever, but
that's cute.
Just that company. Like, I don't think you would get that from, because I have everything that they have, like Giant Loop on my bike, of course, but I'm not an ambassador. I'm not really technically affiliated.
Yeah.
But I pimp the shit out of them when I can.
Yeah.
So they're a great company.
Yeah. I love them.
So you got a box, and you're like, holy moly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the Coyote saddlebag.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was like all that could really go on a sport bike. You can't, like, there weren't panniers for the sport bike, for the Italian super bike.
Right.
Yeah.
What was that like, just riding that thing around? Cause
I just rode it forever.
Oh, I love him.
I rode all over. I've been almost every state on that bike.
Really? That is fascinating.
Yeah.
And you bought that when you're still in Florida?
Yeah, it was 2006.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you've been in every state?
Yeah. I don't think I've been to Iowa on a motorcycle.
How do you miss Iowa?
I mean,
right there.
I know. Like a lot of UP stuff, and then I just missed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have to go there.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is traveling like that is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And for me, ever since I got into like the adventure stuff, I'm just like, I don't want to be on pavement. I try to avoid as much pavement as possible. I started telling myself like every road leads to gravel.
Yeah.
So I want to try to find the least amount of pavement, even though twisties and the mountains and good roads where you're just throwing the bike back and forth, getting after it, they're still special. They're still a lot of fun. But it's like right now, I'm kind of looking around for a new bike, since the AT-AT's officially totaled. And I'm looking at some more Africa Twins.
Yeah.
And the one that I really got my eye on is in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Oh.
And I'm like, oh, darn.
You're going to have to fly out there and ride it home.
Yeah, it just breaks my heart.
I feel so bad for you.
Right? Damn it. Yeah, I had to buy some crash bars and everything so my luggage would fit on there.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, TAT, let's go.
Yeah.
Trans-America Trail.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
We have the time.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But as of right now, that's kind of my loose plan if it all works out.
That's awesome.
I was talking to the guys yesterday down there, and they're like, you're from where? You want this bike? There's more across the country. I'm like, no, there's really not.
Really?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot out there, but the problem is for me, the 2024s have changed. They put the 19-inch front wheel on the front of the Adventure Sports, and I'm like, no, I want the 21.
Okay.
So I got to buy a 23 or older.
Okay.
So anyways,
yeah,
that's what I'm looking at. And It's really cool, like red and gray. So
Excited for you.
Let's see. They got to have it too. Like I said, my payout just came out today.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
Wow.
And probably still, realistically, by the time that all clears and gets paid off and funds turned, probably, I don't know, late this week, early next week.
Okay.
You know.
Not too long.
Not too long, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very fun.
Yeah, it should be. Heck yeah. So we're kind of moving right along here, you know. So one of the things I will say is you and I think our first real conversation was actually in the hot springs over at Giant Loop.
Yeah. That's where
And-
all conversations happen at the Giant Loop rally.
I guess so, right?
Yeah.
I guess because we were just hanging out in there, and then you just kind of showed up. We were sitting on the ledge or something, and you were sitting over there.
Like swimming around,
Yeah.
seeing who's who.
You're like, hey, these guys are weird. I'm going over there. They might need supervision. But I just remember, I feel like you and I chit-chatted for like an hour in there, you know, just talking about everything. And I was really impressed with just you as a person and getting to know you, because I've known of you to that point. Like I followed your page and stuff and was loosely aware of what was going on. But that was the first time really, wow, okay, she's really cool, you know, and just getting to know everything. And I think even later that night, I was even talking to Critter or my dad or something just about, wow, her story and everything was really cool. And that's when I was thinking about starting the podcast. I was like, you want to come on my podcast? You're like, I'm just going to say yes for now. But
Yeah. I'll never say no to a podcast.
Oh, well, there you go, everybody. Yeah. You heard it here first.
This is probably the longest podcast, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get a lot of people in here like,
I was going to ask, though, like, do you have snacks? Like, because this is so long, like, are we having snacks?
you know, that's the first time I've ever been asked for snacks.
Seriously?
Yeah. I should start just really, I'm like, well, people need like water or Gatorades or something, maybe coffee.
Snacks. We need snacks.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, I'm sorry.
I'm just kidding. Just throwing, yeah.
The next person will have a board of snacks.
A charcuterie, some protein bars.
Yeah, there we go. Oh my gosh. Well, maybe.
Yeah.
Huh.
Pancakes.
Right.
I mean, you should just start eating pancakes on the podcast.
There we go. I do make some mean pancakes.
Yeah,
and I've had some time recently where I've been making them quite a bit and kind of adjusting my recipe.
Oh.
Yeah, the other day I was like, oh, no. And then the next day I was like, okay, better.
What did you do that was so bad? Like, how did you mess it up so bad?
I'll tell you the secret recipe off the air, but I put a little too much of something in it.
Okay.
And I was like, it has to be good.
And it was not.
No, I was cooking it and I was like, smells a little strong here.
Okay.
You know, and then I like took a bite of it and I was just like, oh,
yeah, tell me off air.
yeah. It's really not that big of a deal. But
I know you made it sound like it was, so I was going with it.
yeah. It's top secret. And the Pancake Factory's top secret mission here. Yes. Of course. So there we go. Charcuterie board and pancakes.
Yeah.
Ooh, a board of pancakes.
Oh, yep. Charcuterie pancake board.
There we are.
Yeah.
I think I have my next business setting up right now.
Yeah. Make it happen.
Yeah, hire me for all your events. Right?
Yeah.
I'll just make pancakes. It's fine. Man, that's kind of wild. Now I feel bad.
Just teasing you.
Right. But yeah, it is a long podcast, and I get a lot of people like when they come on here, they're like, I'm sorry, what? How long? You know, and I always laugh. Like Misty Hurst was on here, and her and I chit-chatted for a long time. It was like over 3 hours. And when we got done, we were kind of talking off the air, and she was like, that just flew by.
It does fly by. Like, it definitely flies by. And I'm like, hey, if Joe Rogan can do it.
Well, honestly, that's kind of loosely one of my main podcasts that I listen to. Yeah. And so when I started this, I actually started it all just motorcycles, right? So it was actually called Motorcycles and Podcakes.
Oh,
right.
Cool, yeah.
So I did that. And then at some point I was just like, I have like some other friends out there with incredible stories that have nothing to do with with motorcycling.
Yeah.
You know, and I wanted to talk to him. And I just, you know, if somebody has an interesting story, something I can learn from, or just a rad human, you know, I want to talk to them.
Yeah.
You know, so I actually dropped the motorcycles and it just became PODcakes.
Oh, okay.
You know, and so I have the 3 episodes inside the helmet.
Okay.
So that's what this is, because you're a motorcycle industry person, right? And then outside the helmet,
Okay.
people that don't have any of it.
Oh, I love it.
And then we've done 1 episode, but the current view, because I'm very interested in like, try to get the most non-biased current event issue that's going on. So Sean came on with ADV Oregon, and he and I talked about kind of the Red Sea, the Suez Canal. You know, at the time the Panama Canal was in a drought and they weren't allowing ships through, and kind of the potential impact of you know, the economy, the global economy at that point and stuff. And it was awesome.
Yeah.
You know, so it's trying to be, you have your biases, but you're trying to be like unbiased when you're talking about like, here's the facts. And in the show notes, it was like, as of the recording, this is what we used.
Oh, wow.
So fact checked us.
Yeah.
Right. It's totally like, do what you want.
Very
right.
cool.
So
yeah, it's good stuff.
yeah. So loosely there's the commercial for the podcast. So, okay, let's get into it a little bit.
Okay.
All right. So
now we're getting into it.
I guess, well, that was just like, that was just
That was the
hey,
introduction preamble.
Yeah, that was our greeting.
My whole life story.
Right. Well, that wasn't really the whole life story.
Yeah.
Because I'm very interested, and one of the things that struck me was what you do, right? The nonprofit and all that. So I'm very curious, the history behind it, how life kind of unfolded for you to be aware and be like, I want to do this. Because usually when somebody starts a nonprofit, you already have quite a bit of experience within that niche or whatever, right? Excuse me. So I'm just very curious how this all came about, because I see you now all over the place. Mm-hmm. You were in Alaska talking somewhere, and then I forget where it was, but there was a bunch of ladies and you and
DC. I just came home from DC.
Yeah. So I'm very curious just on all of it, and go.
Yeah. I started this personal project in 2016. I went through a divorce, actually. I was married, and
which you skipped right over.
Which I skipped right over. And so I met my ex-husband in Florida, and then we moved to Oregon together.
Oh, okay.
And it was kind of a rough marriage, I think, for me, but I didn't honestly realize it at the time, because, you know, you hear the narrative, marriage is hard.
Right.
It's like, okay, like I can do hard things, like I can do this. And but I didn't realize how bad it was. And then it like kind of fell apart. It blew up. I actually caught him in an affair. And I just did not see it coming. Like, people say they did not see it coming. And looking back, I'm like, okay, maybe. But at the time, like, his whole deal was loyalty and family. And he was just like a big talker. And he just blew it all up. And I confronted him about it. And I was like, you know, don't do this to us. And he was like, well, I want to be with her. I was like, okay. And I pretty much never saw him again. After 7 years together, he left the house to get some air and like pretty much didn't come back. I saw him one other time at the bank. So it was like a real dark time for me.
Yeah,
because
I can imagine.
It, you know, my whole life just changed like in a blink of an eye. Mm-hmm. Like I'll tell you like the details. I don't really tell this part of the story, but he was like escalating in his behavior. He was just getting kind of like nastier and nastier. And the whole deal was like, it was his job. So I was just trying to be patient. And then he came home one night and he was so mean to me in front of my friends. And my friends were like, that's not right, Lauren. And I went to sleep and I had a dream and it said, go through his phone, which I'd never done before. So I like crawled to the edge of the bed and like crawled around the bed and like got to the floor and took his phone and like crawled backwards into the bathroom. And all of a sudden it was like password protected. I was like, that's a first, but wasn't the brightest. So I figured out his password and I found out about this affair. Yeah. And so because I didn't see it coming, I think like it was, I like to refer to that time as the annihilation.
Okay.
It was bad. It was real bad for me. And what happened was I went to a counselor because I was just wrecked. And it was like, clearly I'm going to need some therapy. And, I talked to her for about an hour, and she looked at me right in the face, and she was like, Lauren, your husband is very emotionally abusive. And I just remember being like, no, like that would make me a victim of abuse, and that's not me. I was like, I had traveled the world. I speak 3 languages. I'm a pilot. I have a 3rd-degree black belt. I've done all these things. Like, I'm a business owner. Like, I'm confident. Like, there was no way for me to reconcile who I thought I was with this person who had been living in this like extreme emotional abuse. So that's why I call it the annihilation, because not only was I getting divorced, like I lost my whole identity. And I started feeling like, oh, I'm like a fraud. Like I do all these things, and I'm this like confident woman, and people look at me all the time, and I just like, I'm not that. Like when you're in an abusive relationship, like what they do is undermine your identity so that they can mold you into what they want you to be.
Okay.
And I didn't know any of this. I didn't know that I had been living through this. And so when this counselor told me this, I was like, I just didn't believe her. And she gave me some books to read and some articles, and it was really, really hard because I had to read about my life. And I was like sick to my stomach for a long time of like, oh shit. Like I didn't know the signs of emotional abuse. I didn't know narcissistic abuse and the behaviors that he was exhibiting. I just thought like, well, yeah, he's a jerk sometimes, and this is really hard. But again, people say marriage is hard. And so it was like a real rock bottom moment for me.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And I saw people getting divorced, and they like weren't that messed up about it. And then they were like remarrying or like whatever. And I just did not feel that. I was like, something's just wrong. And then I learned, yeah, something was very wrong. So since that time, I've had to completely rebuild myself, which sounds cliche in a way when I say it, but it was true. It's like I had to rebuild my self-worth, my sense of self, who I was, what I was willing to like admit about myself, like all of it. I had to start from scratch. And so this all happened in November of 2015. And I like I said, I saw him one other time, and I made him get off my bank accounts. And then he was gone. I never saw him again. And I think that was it was really hard, but it was a huge blessing because I could start the healing right away. And I didn't have to I didn't have his like presence, like standing over me all the time. And so I started to heal. And by March, his whole thing like blew up, and he wanted to come home. And I know that if I hadn't taken the time to learn about emotional abuse, I probably would have let him come back. And I'm so grateful for that time, because I was able to say like, no, I can't do that to myself. Like, you're very abusive and you can't come home. I didn't even speak to him for like 4 months, and now he's like emailing me that he wants to come back home and he misses his wife. And I was really grateful for that time. So that was March, and that was like right around the time when I was like I was like really fucked up for years, but like in that time I was so low and so desperate to feel better. I started thinking about like, how can I climb my way out of this? And I'm a professional photographer. I was photographing women at that time, and I just thought like, what if I can meet other women who have gone through abuse? Even though I was never hit or anything, like I still wanted to meet people who had experienced something similar. Like maybe I can photograph them and they can share with me how they healed, and then maybe I can heal. Like it was really sort of people like, it's like, it wasn't an altruistic thing. Like I was desperate to feel better. And so I thought like, maybe other people can help me with this. And so that's where I just, like right around March, I started getting this idea, like maybe I can photograph people. And at the same time, I just like really wanted to exit my life. So I thought like, what if I can get on my motorcycle and ride, which is, I've been doing that already for 15 years or whatever. I thought, what if I can combine those two things? Like, what if I can go on a bike ride and photograph people? And so by like May, I was like really thinking like, I'm going to do this. And I didn't know what it would look like. And I started thinking like, maybe I can partner with domestic violence shelters and like, which was so naive, like on many, many levels that I was just going to like roll up to, no, you just can't. It doesn't work like that. And someone locally, a friend of mine, actually 2 friends of mine sort of concurrently said, you should meet this woman. She's a survivor of human trafficking. And I was like, ooh, like Cambodia, like that movie Taken. Like, I didn't have a real concept of what human trafficking looks like. And they introduced me to her, and she was really gracious to take a call from me, like a total stranger. And I said, hey, I want to have this thing in mind. And she explained to me in like about a 10-minute window what human trafficking looks like in America, how it happens, how prolific it is, and how it's very similar to my situation in those beginning phases of grooming and emotional abuse, right? And like love bombing and some of the things we can talk about if you want. But like, I started to see like, oh yeah, no, I was never physically beaten. Obviously I was not trafficked, but the bones in the cycle of abuse were exactly the same as pimp controlled trafficking.
No kidding.
And so I was like, oh shit, like, yeah, this is not like Cambodia. This is like right here. This is me. Like, this is, and she was trafficked by a man who she thought was her boyfriend. He groomed her for 9 months. And it was that's what I mean. It was like the same structure. So I got her book and I read it, and I was like, obviously, like, aside from being a human trafficker, like the bones were my ex-husband. Like, those things that happen in abuse are like very uniform how they happen.
So you were just talking about, if we want to talk about it, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, this is kind of one of those things where I would hope somebody would listen to this and then realize that maybe they are in a situation like that, or help understand what's going on, or at least like I have some nieces and stuff, and it's like maybe they'll hear some of the telltale signs and just be more aware. Yeah.
And emotional abuse is so tricky because it doesn't have to be a romantic partnership, and it's not always like men also can be emotionally abused or physically abused or even trafficked, right? But like, so it's good for everybody, I think, to understand the formula for this type of abuse, because it doesn't, like I said, doesn't have to be romantic relationships. Like, you can be abused like this by your boss, by your parent. Like, it's just out there.
Right.
And that was the main thing that I learned in my identity crisis, was that nobody is exempt from abuse. It doesn't matter if you think you're smart, or you came from a good home, or you're confident, or you have a pilot's license. Like, none of that shit matters. Abusers will come in and they will look for the vulnerabilities. And that's what my ex-husband did. Like I told you, he was all about family and loyalty, and like, those are things that are important to me. And abusers come in and they listen really well. And then they sort of feed back to you what you want to hear. And some of them are just malicious people, and that's what they do. I don't think my ex-husband was malicious in that way. I think he just operates that way. Mm-hmm. I don't think he sat there and said, I'm going to choose this woman and then I'm going to do these things to her. I think he just, unfortunately, is really unaware of these patterns of behavior. Traffickers are very malicious. They know what they're doing. So like Rebecca Bender, this woman that I spoke with, that I eventually went on to partner with and that I still partner with, she was chosen. Like, she had a small child at the time. She was 19. She was isolated, and he targeted her. And so the grooming phase can look like anything from a couple of weeks to a couple of years.
Wow.
And it kind of like, there's a couple of things that happen, like love bombing, I mentioned, where they're just so overly affectionate. You feel like, wow, I've like really met my person. They're so attentive, and they're just so into me, and they listen to me, and they send me like flowers every day, or like whatever it is. It's called love bombing. It's where you overwhelm someone with so much affection, you feel like you've lost your ground, like, and your dreams are coming true. And that's like, it's kind of like in the military where you're conditioning somebody. So they love bomb you and then they withhold. And then you think, what did I do? I shouldn't have said that. I should have picked up the laundry. I should have done this. And like, it becomes like psychological warfare. So they love bomb, then they withhold. Then they love bomb, then they withhold. And then they criticize. And so that's really common. Like if you feel like you're in a relationship where it's like hot or cold, like all the time, and you just never know what you're going to get, and it makes you feel bad about yourself, that's a huge red flag. That's definitely part of the grooming process. The other ones are isolation, right? And this happened in my relationship where my ex-husband would be like one of my best friends since junior high. It would start like, oh, he's like really sarcastic. And I'd be like, oh yeah, I guess I kind of never noticed that about my friend. Like, yeah, he's kind of sarcastic. And then a couple weeks would go by, like, that really, really is starting to bother me. And I'd be like, oh, it got to the point where it's like, he's not allowed in my home anymore. And it was so slow. And now he was so convincing that my friend, like, who is to this day, one of my closest, dearest friends, was like basically not allowed in my own home because he was annoying to that's isolation. So if you look around your life and suddenly you're sort of alone, like my ex-husband feuded with all of my friends. There was always something until by the time he left, I looked around and was like, not that I didn't have friends or they still weren't in my life, but like I had really neglected those relationships because I could only focus on keeping him happy. That's another red flag.
Yeah.
So isolation.
That is, yeah. Unfortunately, we know some people like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That whole thing where it's just, you can't see them or that.
Yeah. But when you're in it, you're literally just trying to survive the day. And you're literally trying to like evade a bad mood. And it's like, if I just make everything perfect, he'll be in a good mood and things will be wonderful again. Like, and I had periods in my marriage where like, they were so blissful, like months sometimes. He was just in a good mood. He would like cut little apple, like he would cut hearts into apples and like bring me breakfast in bed, and he would like draw me baths, and he would like, on social media just be like my wife and blah 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 blah, and that would last for months, and we would like fall asleep giggling, like the shit you really want.
Yeah. And
then it would just turn on a dime, and I wouldn't know why. I wouldn't know what I did, and it would be like, well, he would like, there's so much projecting. Like, he would say things like, you never finish anything you start. Like, that was a huge one in my marriage. Mm-hmm. And I'd be like, but I'm the one who like graduated college and like, I have all these things that like getting my pilot's license, learning languages, like, but he like didn't have any of those things. But at the time, like, it made me feel really bad about myself. Like, man, I believed him. Like, that's what I talk about, undermining your identity. Like, man, I never finish anything I start, and I'm lazy. That was his big thing. You're just lazy. I'm like the highest achiever. Like, he didn't have any of that stuff. Like, the reason I had to meet him at the bank to get him off my bank account was because I was financially supporting him.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, it's just like, looking back, I'm just like, that's insanity. But when you're in it, you're literally just trying to get through the day. I'm just trying to make sure he's in a good mood. Is he going to sleep well? And like, it was just crazy. Like, he would monitor what I ate and what times I ate and how much I ate. And he was a fitness trainer. So it was always like under the guise of like, I know what's best for you. And if you can't even do that, then you don't respect me. And it's like, no, I respect you. I respect you. It's just total chaos.
That sounds horrible.
Yeah. But I lived that, and I have these memories where he was at work one day, and I love pizza, and I like made an oven pizza. I ate the whole oven pizza.
Okay.
Which actually isn't that hard to do. No. But I was so ashamed. Like, I had the box, and I was, at the time we had that app Voxer where you could like walkie-talkie your friends or whatever. Like, I was in a group chat with my two best friends from growing up.
Breaker one night.
Yeah, exactly. and I remember saying to them, like, you guys, like, is this crazy if I go and like put this pizza box in the dumpster so he won't see it? And I was kind of like joking about it, and they were both like, Lauren, that's not normal.
Yeah.
And I just remember being like, oh, no, it's just funny. Like, he'll just tease me about it. But, like, that's fucked up.
Absolutely. Having to hide what you're eating?
Yeah, totally.
Oh, my gosh.
So, anyways, that's why I think when I went out to try to find people who had healed from that, like, I was really messed up. I needed help.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in that conversation with Rebecca Bender, when she started to describe to me pimp controlled trafficking, and it's this, they live that structure, you know, much more nightmarish, obviously. Mine, I don't like, survivors have taught me never to undermine my own trauma or my own like grief. But yeah, it was not nearly as extreme, obviously.
Trauma's trauma, though.
Yeah,
You
sure.
know, in our own mind and the feelings and stuff. But there are definitely different levels of it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I talked to finish up that story, when I talked to Rebecca Bender and I said, like, this is what I've been through, and she had me look at the cycle of abuse wheel. There's the domestic violence wheel, and you can look at like the different forms of violence, like domestic violence, and like where you fit on that. And because I remember she introduced me as like a domestic violence survivor, and I was like, whoa. Like, you can't say that about me. People will think I've been hit and stuff. And she was like, well, no, but you should look at the control and coercion wheel. Like, it's actually is considered in that spectrum because of the way that they like manipulate everything.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's serious. So anyways, when I explained my story to her, she was so gracious. And I said, this is like, I'd love to like just ride my motorcycle around the country and photograph people. And I explained all that to her. And she was a survivor and had escaped and started a nonprofit called the Rebecca Bender Initiative. And they have a school called Elevate Academy. And at the time, they had like 150 graduates from this online school. And what she did was she escaped and she got her master's degree online, and it hit her one day, like, if I can get my master's online, I can mentor survivors online. So she launched this school. And so at the time it was a 6-week school where it's free to survivors, and they teach you everything from like how to write a resume to how to dress for the workplace, to how to deal with complex PTSD. Like, and also they just teach survivors like how to dream again, because like when you're being trafficked, traffickers are telling you that this is all you're good for. And so like Rebecca Bender talks about like she had to discover that she was like good at watercolor painting, and that she was good at this, and that she actually had dreams to do that. And because when you're so beat down emotionally for so long, like you forget to dream and hope. And so part of that course is they teach survivors how to dream and hope again. And so because they had 150 graduates at the time that were all over the country, I mapped out where I wanted to go. And they were really gracious, and they sent an email out to their whole survivor network. And they said, wow, this is Lauren's route. Like, here's Lauren. This is who she is. Here's her route. If you want to take her up on an opportunity for professional portrait photography, like shoot us an email back. And we had to cap it at 40. It was insane.
Oh, no
We got
kidding.
so many responses.
Wow.
And so I went through my ex-husband's phone in November. By March, I had this idea. By May, I started making contacts. By June, I partnered with Rebecca Bender. And by September, I was on the road.
Wow.
And I was a mess.
Were you?
Yeah. And I thought like, oh, I'm going to go on the road and heal my broken heart.
Oh, man.
I'm like laughing. Yeah. Because what happened was I went on the road and I met 40 survivors of sex trafficking, and my heart was broken 40 more times. Like it was rough. It was amazing. It was all these things, but
I get the spectrum you just gave right there. It's heartbreaking yet amazing for sure. I don't, it's just one of those things. I don't know a lot about it, about the whole human trafficking thing. Mm-hmm. There is another tat out there, Truckers Against Trafficking. Yeah. And, you're always, you get the little stickers and you read the literature and stuff, and you're always kind of looking around. And you hear stories once in a while where a trucker was like, oh, I saw something and made the phone call, and things happened and for the good. Yeah. But as far as, I think it's always, like you're talking about this different kinds of like manipulation and stuff where people just come into your life and kind of groom you for it. I'm always under the impression it's just like you're walking through a parking lot and you're gone.
Yeah, no.
The kidnapping kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
then stepping back a little bit, there's two things I want to get back to. One, we went right over your pilot's license thing. That's kind of cool.
It's in those Florida years. It's cool.
It's in the Florida years. But teaching people to hope and dream again.
Yeah.
Like that actually kind of hit me a little bit. I was like, wow, it's nothing I would ever think about.
Yeah.
I think it's something that's for the most part normal. And I know a lot of people out there who know me will say I'm not normal. But
yeah.
That's the little stuff you just take for granted because it's always like, I have hopes and dreams and this and that, that I want to do. Yeah. And just to have that robbed from you and have to learn to do that again is, I don't even know what the word would be to describe it. It was just profound to hear that.
Yeah, it's really tragic and really encouraging, that there's a school like Elevate Academy out there. But yeah, I mean, that's what abuse does. It robs you of so many things. And particularly in a situation where you're being trafficked, it's incredibly violent. I mean, the statistics on whether you even survive are, I think, like 6%. Like people in prostitution, prostituted people, like it's very, very, very violent.
I didn't even know it was that low.
Yeah, it's very low. And so to think about, like, for people to profit off that, they have to keep you mentally in chains, because that's the whole deal. Is people think human trafficking, they think like people locked in cages. That's not the reality at all. They're walking among us. The chains are psychological, much like my marriage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they do that by just beating you down and building you up and beating you down and building you up. And there's a lot of survivor memoirs out there that I could recommend that kind of give you like the inside vision of what that looks like. But it's like, I've said it before, it's psychological warfare.
That is crazy. Before I forget, if you think about it when you get home this afternoon and you want to email me some of those links or the titles or something I can put in the notes, that'd be great.
Yeah, Rebecca Bender, her website has a resource page, and there's a lot of survivor book titles on there as well. But I can definitely send you one. I'm reading one right now, and it is like knocking my socks off. But so kidnapping is like less than 5%.
That's incredible.
Yeah. It's just not how it happens.
I thought the spectrum was completely flip-flopped.
Yeah.
That was just my interpretation of it.
That's part of the work that we do, is to like bring education to how this really happens, because you have a lot of misconceptions out there. And like, how do you combat something when you don't understand, there's all these viral TikToks of like, oh, if someone puts peanut butter on your windshield, or like there's an apple at the gas station, like, it's like, I don't understand why I understand why they go viral, because people, it's like fear inducing. And like, you feel like, oh, if I know it, then it won't happen to me. I don't understand like why people make them, because they're just legit false.
Mm-hmm.
They're just false. It's just not how it happens.
Right. The zip tie on your
zip tie, like it's a phenomenon for sure. Like how these things are. Like sometimes I watch influencers and I'm just like, why are you making shit up?
Yeah.
Like, where'd you even get that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm always like the person in the comments, like, please cite your resources. Where's the research on this? Like,
right.
Yeah.
Well, I think I've probably been guilty of passing one of those on years ago to one of my nieces,
Well, of course, because it induces fear, and you want them to like learn how to do sign language help or whatever. Like, it's like, okay.
Yeah, because everybody knows what the 4 behind your back means or whatever it is. I don't know.
I don't know. It's baffling.
Yeah, I know one of my nieces, a while ago, we have Clackamas Town Center here, and across the street's the Clackamas Promenade. And I don't know, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, there were some abductions that were going on in there, and it was kind of a thing for a hot minute, And my niece, she's just fearless. She's like, I don't care, whatever. Yeah. And I'm like, like you should be fearless or, a little fearing rather. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably the time something like that popped up, and I was like, Kaya, watch this.
Yeah.
Show this to your sister.
I understand the impulse. Like, I'm not dogging that for sure. Yeah. Like, we all want to be educated on it.
Right.
But I think it's important to like,
Realize they're not
yeah,
real.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get that because I've seen some things they'll say about trucking or something. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
That's not even close to it.
That's like my family. They're all ranchers, and boy, do they hate that show in the Wyoming with the
Yellowstone?
Yeah. Oh God, it just makes them so mad.
Isn't that real?
Yeah.
I thought it was based on true events.
It is similar. When you know, you're just like, oh God. Which is how the whole anti-trafficking movement felt when that Sound of Freedom movie came out.
Didn't even see it.
Oh gosh.
But yeah.
Maybe don't get me started.
Well, maybe we should.
Well, we do have hours. Like,
Right,
yeah. We
right.
could fill it all up with
See
that.
that little spark in your eye when you were talking about that. It's like, uh-oh.
Yeah. No, but yeah, so after Rebecca and I partnered, I went on the road in September. I was 8 weeks on the road. I did 10,000 miles, 10,117 miles on the Ducati Monster.
That is fantastic. Oh my gosh. A little jelly at the moment.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah.
And I met and photographed almost 40 survivors.
So before we get too far away from this, tell me about like day one to the first survivor, because I would imagine by 40, you knew what to expect. I'm sure there was a lot of similarities, even though each one was individual, right? So you kind of, I don't want to say became numb or whatever. You probably just became knowledgeable of what to expect, right? So pulling up to that first, maybe second or third or whatever, I mean, what was that like going, like knowing you're about to meet this person and this story and stuff? 'Cause all that stuff to me is quite, I want to say fascinating, but I don't know if that's quite the right word to use right there, but it's, you know, it's just something that very striking interest in.
Yeah. Well, so when I partnered with Rebecca in June, she was really, I think she had a lot of wisdom to help me get like trauma informed as quickly as I could. Because a couple of things, like many survivors, if not all, had been trafficked or have been trafficked on cameras or through pornography. And having their photo taken is not easy. It can be very traumatic. And so making sure that I was trauma informed as a photographer. So the first thing that Rebecca did was she hooked me up with some of her closest survivor leader friends, and I got to photograph them first. And they were sort of like really far along on their healing, and they were so gracious with me. And I feel like they just like poured into me and held my hand and said like, here's some things to consider. Like I would have never considered like pulling my camera up to my face and looking at somebody could be a trigger.
Oh yeah.
For a survivor. And so I met with and photographed probably 4 or 5 survivors before I actually went on the road that day one. So I photographed Rebecca. I photographed like I had went to Denver for some other work, and I photographed 2 survivors there who are still, so many of these people are like my best friends, but they're like powerhouse leaders in the anti-trafficking movement. Like one of them, her name is Jessa Crisp. She was the one that was like, this yellow like Nikon strap is like triggering. And so she's like, you should get like a custom strap. And I was like, amazing advice, like something so simple. And so I ordered one of those like canvas. It's like blue and has a little leather, and I put my signature on it. And it's just like, it's much more personal, and it's not something like if you went into a porn set or something, those straps are on everything. And so that was like the first advice she gave me. The second one she gave me was, let them hold your camera before you start taking a photo of them. Like let them touch it and have that sort of tactical experience with it. Let them take a picture. And so on every shoot, I sort of have this thing where I walk over and I say, so this is my camera. It's a Nikon. I say, I only shoot natural light, so I don't come with any lights or anything. Like it's not a production. I have one lens, which is a portrait lens. And like, this is, you know, and then I explain to them like, and I try to make it light and like make jokes, and like because it's a fixed lens, what that means is I don't have a zoom. And so if I want to get a portrait, I have to get really close. And if I want to get full body, I have to back way up. So I'm going to be like this all the day, all the whole time. And like, I might trip at some point. And like, I just try to make it light and funny and like explain to them the process. Like, these are the things that I learned from survivors, like how to make them feel comfortable. Also, the photo shoots are a gift and they're a celebration. So like when you Google human trafficking victim online, you see black and white photos, white kids, handcuffed to radiators with bruises and hands over their mouth. And it's like, that's not what trafficking is. And that's not what these photo shoots are. Like, these photo shoots are a celebration and they're a gift, meaning you do not have to do anything in return. So they're not obligated to share their stories with me. These aren't interviews. And I can go up and meet them as if they were just a photography client and never hear a thing about human trafficking. And that's fine. It's not the point. Mm-hmm. And so they also aren't required to sign model releases because survivors of human trafficking have been exploited commercially. So not like a survivor of breast cancer. Like, these people have been exploited commercially for money, and you give them something because they have to give you something in return. Like, that's what they're used to, transactional experiences, transactional relations. And so that's not what this is. And so these are all of the things that I learned before I went on the road in that very short 2-month window of like what to look out for and just how to be tender and patient. I never want to do harm.
Right.
And this is a very triggering thing. And so that's why people are like, oh, I'm a photographer, like hook me up with some survivors. And I'm like, no, like I would never do that. I don't know how trauma informed you are. I don't know, like you have to be very careful with your verbiage, like your language, like how you're complimenting them. Like it's very nuanced.
I can imagine something like just as easy, just, oh, you're beautiful.
Yeah.
Could be totally triggering
Exactly.
for somebody.
Yeah. And I just kind of show up and I just kind of feel like what's the vibe. And what's really important is that I basically only photograph Elevate graduates because I know they've been through some level of healing. And so that's why I laugh, like when I say, oh, I'm just going to go to a domestic violence shelter and like photograph these people. I thought in the beginning, like this could be a project. And it's like, no, you can't just like roll up on a woman who's like deep in her trauma, who've just escaped her abuser and like put a camera in her face. Like that's ridiculous.
I know. Yeah.
There has to be some level of healing.
Holy moly.
And so that's why I love partnering with the Elevate Academy. So I photograph now almost 100 survivors. Wow. And I'd say 90% of them are Elevate graduates, or they've been referred by an Elevate graduate. So I also know that there's some healing that's happened because it could be very, very triggering. I'm writing my book right now. I'm done with the book. I'm in revisions right now, and I talk about a lot of this stuff. And like just when you're like looking at trauma in the face, like there's just like I started noticing things like sometimes they'd be like totally normal, and then I'd pull up my camera and their blinks would go really slow. It's like there's something like neurological that happens with PTSD, where it's like every time I'd click the shutter, they'd look left. Or like, you know, it's like there's just all these little things that get stuck in your body that I've noticed, like, and I just try to be really, really lighthearted and really, I don't like fill up all the space with talking. Like I'm just there. I'm just like try to be like a presence, and I think that's like kind of like my gift. I think like even when I hang out, I know I'm talking a ton today, but like even when I hang out with my best friend, she's always saying like, I just feel calm when you're around. Like that's something that I'm able to bring to those photo shoots too.
Yeah.
So,
which is probably something very comforting to those people.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't had a bad experience yet. So yeah.
Hopefully you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, the fact that they kind of recognize that, hey, you need some trauma education here, you know, and at least being able to give you the verbiage and things to expect. And I think that's huge.
It was a crash course for sure. And now 8 years later, I'm very informed, and I know so much more about trafficking. Like I literally, I didn't know what I was walking into.
Right. Well, you started with a great idea.
I had an idea. I had a heart for it. I had really great mentors.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Really great mentors. Obviously I never could have done this without Rebecca Bender. I talk about her all the time but her and her network and just the network she's opened me up to, and
Sounds amazing.
she's cool.
Yeah. So you did 4 before you left.
Yeah, I think like
Ish.
maybe 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was in what town? Was it here?
I did that. I actually travel a lot for my photography work. So I shot some people I photographed some people in Colorado and Portland and Southern Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a few shoots. And then when I hit the road, we hit the ground running. We did a big event because it was also a fundraiser. So we ended up raising almost $60,000 together.
Wow.
For the Elevate Academy. And so I did like events in 7 cities along the route. And like I went straight, and sometimes like I went straight up I-5. I did a thing in Portland at Motocorsa.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to Olympia, and like 6 or 7 survivors met me at a park. And so I would do that where I would shoot like 6, 7 people in a day.
Wow, that's busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I would ride for 1,300 miles and I'd shoot one. And then I would ride and then yeah.
So a couple things. So on this trip, was it a camping trip, or were you hoteling it?
No, I basically crashed on a lot of couches and I camped.
Yeah.
I did get a couple of hotels just when weather was so bad, and I just ride all day in the rain. Mm-hmm. And I just knew I wouldn't be dry in the tent. I would get a hotel.
Yeah.
And I'd like hang my stuff up in the hotel. I'd just be like dripping on the floor, and I'd be like, so glad I'm not in a tent right now.
Oh my gosh, right?
Yeah.
Those days are so neat.
I know. I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of over it. I've been doing it for so long. I'm just kind of like, should I get an Airbnb?
Yeah, should we do this?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you did 7 events.
Mm-hmm.
So what were those like? Were they just kind of like a convention, or just...
Yeah, more like little fundraisers. Like we had them at a restaurant once. And so I did them in Medford, Portland, Minneapolis, or Stillwater, St. Augustine, Florida. Did one in Memphis. Did one in Phoenix. Did one in Humboldt County.
Okay.
At 7. I think that's what I did.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and there was like sometimes at a coffee shop, one time in a parking lot at a Chick-fil-A. Like it was just like wherever we had resources and support, we would like put together a little event, and then the people on the ground would like invite their friends, and I would like give a little speech, and we'd ask for funds. And
yeah, you totaled out at about $60K.
yeah, I think it was like 54,000, and that was like partly my network and my Facebook stuff, and then partly Rebecca's network. She tapped into her network too, and then got a matching grant for 10,000 or 5,000, and so it was like definitely a joint effort. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, that is very cool for sure.
Yeah,
very cool. And so, what was some of the writing highlights of that trip? Because we know you're doing a pretty serious task and meeting these people, but I'm sure along the way you're like, this is rad. Riding right through here or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. I think emotionally I was very flip-flopping between this is rad and I'm miserable. Like I was so sad.
Yeah.
And I know I talked about like not having my ex-husband's like presence there, but his voice was in my head for years. Like I just not good enough, or like this or that, and that woman he cheated with must be so much better than me, and I bet she makes like a really good sandwich, and like just really impractical, hurtful things that I just would say to myself now that he wasn't there to say them to me.
Right.
So it was a trip. So like I'd be on the bike I basically did like 300 mile day, 400 mile day, 600 mile day, 300 mile day, 600 mile day. Like it was just like back to back huge days.
Right.
And sometimes I would just cry. Like I would freaking cry for 400 miles. Like I was a mess.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'd be like blasting across Montana thinking like it's the most beautiful place ever. And like, so I was very present. It's like that thing where you're just like heightened.
Yeah.
It's like really high highs, really, I wouldn't say high highs, but like really present and also like just very present to a lot of pain. Yeah, I know. I didn't talk about this stuff for years. I'm only talking about it now because I'm writing my book and I'm like revisiting it all.
I can actually kind of relate to having to revisit some pain stuff, you know. I did my inner monologue video, and it was like my story of, you know, attempting suicide and stuff like that. And when I decided to do do the video, it was really tough for me because this was, you know, over a decade later. But it's kind of the same thing. You're going back and revisiting the worst time of my life.
Yeah.
You know, and so all those feelings are coming up, and then, okay, the video, like the filming is done and the concept is done and all of this. Now I got to edit, you know, and it was just like,
Brutal.
you know, if you know anything about editing, it's just not click, 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 click. It's like click, replay, click, okay, this, okay, that, you know, so you're constantly, for 2 weeks, I was in that bubble. And it took me probably 2 weeks after that to get out of that bubble, you know. And so you're talking about a lot of the stuff that I really remember, and that even lately, some of the things going on the backside too are just like that, what I call my inner monologue. It creeps back in super easy, you know, and you just got to, am I listening to it? Am I pushing it away? Am I telling it to fuck off? What am I doing? Right. So it's one of those things. So you're talking about being inside your helmet and like, you know, crying or whatever. And I'm like, been there, done that, you know. The wind therapy is powerful on a motorcycle, you know, but I connect with what you're saying there 100%.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately it's kind of like a journey of my mental health, right? Like, yeah, I did these things, but like in reality, I was really stuck inside my own like little nightmare. Yeah, it's terrible.
It really is terrible, especially like long days. You know, like
really long days.
If you don't ride and you're listening to this, it's hard to explain. For most people, 300 miles in a car that's a huge day for them.
Yeah, it's a big
right?
day.
And then, you know, as a truck driver, I'm like, well, you know, 750 miles or whatever. You know, that's something that we do, but you don't realize on a motorcycle how different it is. You know, how acute you're paying attention to the little things in the road, and then how a 600-mile day alone with your thoughts in a helmet while you're still trying to be, you know, hyper focused on everything could be the best thing and the most dangerous thing all at the same time for your head.
Yeah, and then I also like to remind people that that's a 3-gallon tank.
Right. Yeah,
so a 600-mile day, I'm also pulling over every 100 miles for gas. Like it just stretches the day out so long.
Right. That's a little baby tank.
I know.
Oh my
so
God.
Dumb. So impractical.
So dumb.
Yeah.
Man, 100 miles stop, 100 miles stop. Boy,
which actually isn't bad, right? To get in that rhythm of like stretching and then, all that. But yeah, you got to drink water, you got to eat. Like,
I get in a really bad, like, in the groove, if you will. So 6.4 gallons in the AT-AT. And there's been multiple times when I'm by myself where I would just go gas station to gas station.
Yeah.
I wouldn't stop. I would just go.
How far can you go on that?
That's a loaded question. So for me, it depends on the environment I'm riding in. So if I'm just on the pavement, I'm very more controlled, you know, so I don't, it has cruise control, but I never really use it too much. So I've done 240, 260 miles, somewhere in that bubble, you know, on a tank. Now if I'm off road, I have this disease that's called brapitis. So I'm very brappy, and I like to, I don't know, I like just to let the back end do its thing and come around on me and do those and brap, you know. So
and then some more brap.
Yeah, and then once I think I'm under control, I brap more. So if I'm doing that, I mean, I can cut that down to like 180 miles, you know. It's just like,
that's still a lot. 180 off road in one go. Yeah,
but
that's hilarious.
I know I'm not the only brapitis person out there, but
probably not.
I'm okay with that too.
Yeah. Bunch of hoodlums, y'all.
Well, yeah. I do have a mode on there that I just called hooligan mode.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was wide open and
Yeah.
it's so fun.
I love it.
Yeah. So 10,100 and something miles, was it?
17.
10,117. That's a legit amount of miles for sure.
I think it's the same as Anchorage to Ushuaia.
No kidding.
I think it's more. I think that's like 8,000.
Huh.
For context.
And that was all here in the States.
Yeah. I went Southern Oregon up to basically Seattle, over to Coeur d'Alene, and then all the way over to Minnesota, and then the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and then down through Ohio, and then Pennsylvania, New York City, and then down to Jacksonville, St. Augustine, Florida, and then up to Memphis, back down to Dallas and Austin, and then across to Phoenix, Albuquerque, south of Albuquerque. No, Albuquerque's before Phoenix.
Yeah.
And then San Diego, and then made my way back up to Southern Oregon. This is like a big square.
Yeah. Yeah, that's legit for sure. So New York City, that must have been fun.
Yeah, it wasn't actually my first time riding motorcycle through New York City.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was good. I was coincided with some girlfriends who were there on work, and so they had this like big fancy hotel, and I just was like, this is glorious. They let me crash in their hotel, like in Manhattan.
Oh, there you go.
And I have a really good friend, actually my photography mentor in Long Island.
Okay.
So I stayed out there a couple days. So
Yeah.
yeah, Long Island.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've done some trucking through town there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah.
But you were asking me about just like being on the bike. Yeah, the weather was crazy. I was in a storm from basically Pennsylvania to New York City. Like it was just like it rained for days and days and days and days, like 4 days. And then I got down to Florida, and we had our event, and then the next day Hurricane Matthew was hitting. So that was a lot of rain, and then my bike broke down.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and I rode through the hurricane to get out. It was just... And then
I'm sorry, what?
What?
You rode through the hurricane?
Yeah, Hurricane Matthew hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're like, hey,
I mean, I had an event in Memphis. I didn't have, like... That was the thing, like, because of these events, it was like I didn't have downtime. Like, I was on a schedule.
You and I were in Memphis at the same time.
So that would have been October 2nd or something. Maybe like my event in Memphis was October 5th, 2016.
Yeah, we legit were, I think, there at the same time. I was in Memphis when that hurricane was coming through, but it was far enough north. It was just like a tropical depression at that point, I believe is what it was. But it was just raining, and I was there for, I can't remember which way I was going. I think I had water that was actually going down Louisiana, Texas. I don't know. I think it was one of my FEMA loads that I would haul.
Yeah.
So we had a bunch of stuff, and we were just staged there. And I just remember hanging out there at the truck stop going, man, it is raining like Oregon.
Yeah.
You know?
And there I am. Wee.
Right. That's wild.
Yeah.
Man, I couldn't imagine riding through. I've ridden through heavy rains, hail where it stings even through your clothes, you know.
And there.
And then a lot of heavy wind, but I haven't combined everything yet.
Yeah.
I haven't been in just crazy wind and rain. So that must have been exciting.
And snow.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm kind of like, I just want to be warm. I've done all that for so many years. I'm just coming back from the Tour Tech rally, and I was in Seattle, and I was riding over to Plain. It was like 2.5 hours or something like that. Rained. There was no rain on the forecast, 50 degrees, zero visibility on Stevens Pass. I was just like, really, like joking now, like really questioning my lifestyle choices. I'm like, how am I still doing this? Like, thank goodness for my hippo hands.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great
My friend's
things.
like, you just ride with your hippo hands in the summer? I'm like, Yes, the Pacific Northwest. It could be 45 degrees and raining. You just don't know.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've taken mine off a few times, and I'm actually really glad I did recently,
Mm-hmm.
or they probably would have been shredded. But yeah, I do the same thing. I've had times where I've walked out of my garage and I'm just looking at the sky like, am I taking these off or am I leaving them on today? What am I doing?
I just leave them on.
Yeah.
I even left them on, and I went like all the way from Southern Oregon through Utah and Colorado and New Mexico and Arizona during that heat dome.
Yeah.
2020.
That was incredible.
Whatever. It was
Yeah.
119 degrees. I'm just like, I got heat exhaustion twice, and I'm just like riding through Southern Arizona with my hippo hands. I didn't care.
That is legit.
It was awful. I was so sick.
I can
And then
imagine.
for like a year or two, I would just get real sick, like at the drop of getting hot. Just like, oh, it's like your body just takes a long time.
That's what.
Yeah, and I ride full gear, and it's all black.
Right.
And it's just like my phone just was in my tank bag, overheated. I lost my map. Like it just pulled over at this place and put my phone in the refrigerator at the gas station. Like just hot, miserable.
You know, I think one of the hottest days that I've had, it was only 104, and I was in Zion National Park, and there was this section of road. I think I came in from, I don't know, the north or something, and I was heading to the lodge. So I'm kind of going through the canyon, and they have that tunnel where it's one-way traffic, so you have to wait. And I was waiting, but there was just these rocks right alongside me, and I was just, you could feel just
like
radiating, you know, like I literally felt like I was cooking.
Yeah.
And I just was like, and I was on a solo trip, multiple days, just, you know, hot weather. And I remember like, I'm getting a hotel tonight.
Yeah.
This is too much for me.
That's what I had to do on that trip. So that heat dome was nuts. That was like every city I rode through hit their historical high.
Yeah, we were at 115 at this house.
From Salt Lake City to Denver. Denver was 109 degrees when I was in Denver. I literally just rode to every like historical high for like a week and a half.
Oh, jeez.
So yeah, I started getting hotels. I didn't camp. It was just like, you can't because I was trying to leave at like 4:35 in the morning to beat the heat. And then it's like I was getting to my destination by 2-3 p.m. I was just going to like sit in a tent.
At the hottest point of the day.
119 degrees.
Right.
117, 112, like the whole friggin' trip. It was rough. And then the next summer I went on the road again, and I think I was still like, I don't know like what happens in the body, but like I went up to Canada, and I'm in Kamloops, Canada, and it's 104 degrees. I was just like, what is happening? It's either raining or I'm scorched. Like it's kind of like lost the romance a little.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
100% lost it.
Yeah.
So
I did. I came home from that trip. I'm fast forwarding. This was 2022.
Okay.
This Canada trip. I was photographing survivors. And it's just like everything started going wrong on my bike and with my health. And it was like the universe was telling me, like, get off the road. So I cut my trip short, and I went home. And I was like super burnt out. Real burnt out. And then my board gave me, like, I'm definitely fast forwarding to my org, but my board gave me a sabbatical. Like, it was right at year 6. I was getting burnt out on trafficking. I was getting burnt out on just the world and COVID and all that stuff. And then my board gave me a sabbatical. And then I said, next year I'm only riding my motorcycle for fun. And that's when I met you.
Oh.
Yeah. That was my first trip out where I was like, I'm not speaking. I'm not having a booth. I'm not photographing survivors. Like, because I was at a breaking point after that Canada trip where I was like, do I even like this? Like, I was wrecked from that. So I like it again now.
That's fantastic.
I've just been doing it for fun now last year and this year.
Mm-hmm.
I just did kind of my rally circuit and like just had fun. And like, it's like, oh yeah, I love it more than ever.
Kind of fell in love with it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's why I said, I'm just going to ride my motorcycle for fun. Because for 6 years, I'd just been riding my motorcycle for work.
Yeah.
Either speaking at events or tabling or photographing for 6 years. And I just got burnt out.
I feel that.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it was with my company.
Yeah.
You just hit the point and you're like, yeah, I'm done.
Can't do it anymore. Yeah.
Let's go bye-bye. So let's talk about your org, right? So the conception of that, when did that kind of come around and, all that kind of fun stuff?
Yeah. So when I went on that road, that first trip, I did think it would just be a one-off personal project. Mm-hmm. We did name it. We called it Ride My Road in the beginning.
Right. Which is the name of your Instagram.
It's the name of my org. Yeah. And I wasn't a nonprofit because the funds we were raising were going straight to Rebecca's org. But then I came home and like I was forever changed because I learned a lot about trafficking and how it happens. And there's 25 typologies of trafficking in the United States. So it doesn't all just happen one way. It can happen a myriad of ways. And
25.
Yeah, in the United States. Yeah.
Okay.
That's why people are like, oh, it's kidnapped kids. And it's like, no, not even close. Like not even close. So once I learned that, I sort of and I just think that like going all the way back to Guatemala, I had always wanted to do like social justice. Like in college, I thought that's what I was going to do. And I was applying for like Amnesty International. And I just couldn't find my way. And then this stuff hit and it was like, okay, this is what my whole life has been building to. Like social justice, disenfranchised populations, vulnerable populations, exploitation. So anyways, it felt like this is kind of what I'm supposed to be doing. And when I came off the road, people kept inviting me to speak. People still wanted to donate. Survivors wanted to be photographed. And eventually Rebecca said, like, you're going to need your own nonprofit. And so that's what happened. I made Ride My Road a 501c3. I did a year at SOU getting my certificate in nonprofit management, which honestly it's not that much different than being a business owner, which I have always been. But there are nuances, and fundraising is its own whole thing. And yeah, here we are. It's my full-time job. I've been doing it ever since. I have my org. We've raised, I think, over $400,000 for survivor-led initiatives, photographed almost 100 survivors, events all over the country, charity rides. We recently got into the conference sector. So I co-hosted a conference in Alaska last year, did it again this year, and then hosted my own conference in Southern Oregon. It was a really exciting event. We fix up old motorcycles and raffle them off, do those as sweepstakes to raise funds. We've given away 5 motorcycles. So just a lot of stuff we do. And now in addition to that, I'm on full-time staff at Epik Project, which is a different anti-trafficking org, which I'd love to talk to you about because we have our podcast over there too.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's men fighting trafficking.
Really?
Very unique. So
that is...
You want to talk about men's mental health and masculinity and the man box and all that stuff.
Well, that's all the stuff I'm trying to get out there. Yeah. Same with Critter.
Yeah, I know.
You got to give Critter the props where props are due. You know.
Critter introduced us too.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yep. Kind of cool.
I know. I saw him at Giant Loop. He wasn't at Tour Tech though. I was very sad.
No. Yeah. Tour Tech to me is one of those things where I probably should go. But I always hear that 1,500 people are going to be there, and I'm just like, eh.
It doesn't feel like it, though.
You're not the first person to tell me that.
It does not feel like it.
Yeah.
I think it's because it's so open. Mm-hmm. Where, like Giant Loop, you have like your little area where everybody's at. Like to envision 1,500 people there would be a nightmare.
Right. Yeah.
But it's not like that at Tour Tech.
Yeah.
It does not feel crowded.
Maybe I'll have to go next year.
It's so fun.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
I was definitely watching everybody's stories on Instagram. I was like, well,
a little FOMO.
Yeah. I was just like, look at everybody that's there. It's like all my friends.
All your friends are there. It's great riding.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous scenery. Like, you should come.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine.
Don't let the 1,500 other people deter you.
Okay. I'll be there next year. Yeah. You're hearing it here first, kids.
Okay. We'll see you there.
Sounds good to me. I don't do many of the rallies like that.
Yeah.
I'll be up at Critter's event to get lost, find yourself.
That sounds so fun.
You should come.
I'm not gonna be able to swing it this year, but isn't it sold out anyways?
Yeah, we could probably get you in.
Yeah.
I know somebody.
That's what Critter was like. Well, I missed the boat. Tour Tech sold out. I was like, we'll just get you. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Right.
But he had other things going on.
Yeah. That he did.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you can ever make it to the Get Lost.
Yeah.
It's unique and chill, and the riding up there is stupid good.
And it's far, right? Because it's I mean, for me to get to Vancouver is...
Oh, Vancouver. Then you got to
go all the way up
to the island.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the best place is to take the ferry out of Port Angeles and ride it into Victoria.
Okay.
Critter's roughly... Well, he tells everybody he's in Nanaimo. So, that's...
No, but isn't the rally way north of that?
Yeah, so if you're in Victoria to Nanaimo where Critter's at, it's probably like hour and a half, 2 hours.
Sure.
And it's 4 hours north of that, roughly.
Okay, I thought it was like 8 or something like...
From here. Well,
no, from Vancouver, I thought it was like, okay.
What's funny is you don't realize how big Vancouver Island is, but if you you measure it and you put the top of it right on the Canadian border in Blaine, Washington, it goes all the way down past you.
Oh, wow.
In Medford and stuff.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Once I saw that and put it into perspective of just how long the island is, you're like, oh, that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because he was like, it's 4 hours north of here. I'm like, isn't it just like an hour to the tip?
It's just like an island. Yeah,
right? And I'm like,
cool.
Can't be that far.
It is beautiful up there.
Yeah. So what's more about your the goals and stuff of your nonprofit?
Yeah, I mean, it started as like fundraising. Yes, I do the survivor portraits, and that's a gift to survivors, but really I wanted to fundraise for Rebecca's org. And then I started learning about survivor leadership, which is a huge element, a huge component of the anti-trafficking movement, is this growth of survivor leadership. So it's basically like, instead of the history of just like a bunch of like savior, like people with savior complexes, like coming in and being like, we're going to save the victims. Like, right. It's not really like helpful. And so the more survivor leadership comes in, the more we're actually like, oh, we're taking a sidestep and we're going to follow their leadership. And what do they need? And what do they see as like the most important things to focus on? Instead of like you really have to, like at Epik Project, they say, put down your baseball bat and take off your hero cape. Because this work is not about rescuing victims. It's about changing the culture of exploitation and providing exit strategies. Because if people aren't kidnapped, how, you're like, yeah, I'm going to kick down the door, like Sound of Freedom style, right? Like, yeah. I'm going to kick down the door and crawl through the jungle and like kill people. Like, it's just not, like, it couldn't be further from the actual solution. And so providing standing aside and letting survivors take leadership has been, I think, one of the biggest things in the United States in our movement to combat human trafficking. I think we're pretty unique globally for that. And it's been, even just in the 8 years I've been involved, it's been incredible to see that like really flourish. And like, basically, if you're interested in fighting human trafficking and you come across the org, the first thing I would ask is, how are you like incorporating survivor leadership, and how are you compensating survivors, and how are you like listening to their expertise? Because I can look at an org almost like on their website and instantly tell like, oh, this organization is not survivor informed. And not that they might not be doing good things, but we don't mess around with orgs that aren't survivor informed. Like, even just like how they taught me to be trauma informed for photography, like that stuff permeates through the whole movement.
That whole just trauma informed term,
yeah,
and survivor leadership and stuff. I mean, these are new terms.
Totally.
Yeah, I've never heard of this stuff before.
Yeah. So we raise funds for survivor-led orgs, and they, it's really incredible when you just look at it. Like, they've lived through what they've lived through. Some of them were trafficked for decades. Some of them were trafficked by their families, familial trafficking. And then they've moved on in their life, got to places where they are healthy enough to like turn around and lift a hand, like lean a hand back to help others. And they're professional public speakers, and they're authors, and they're PhDs, and they're affecting policy and informing policy and creating these incredible orgs, and making law firms to expunge records, and like, it's just incredible. And so that's definitely something, like, if you have any takeaways about getting involved, it's like making sure that where you're at is survivor informed, for sure. Yeah,
that's, again, these terms are just, they're so good to know.
Yeah,
you
it's
know?
nuanced, right?
Yeah.
But like that's the thing. Like, so we started fundraising primarily when you asked me like what's up with my org. Then I sort of like a byproduct of that is awareness.
Of course,
Because
yeah.
I'm like out and about and talking about it, and I've made a major shift in the org to education. Because I'm hosting motorcycle rallies all over the country, and people are coming and like, yeah, like everybody agrees human trafficking is bad. And then they like give some funds, which is very important. I'm not downplaying that by any means. And then they go back into their lives and they don't really know anything about it. And like, yeah, we might give a 20-minute speech at a motorcycle ride or a 30-minute speech about like, oh, it's not kidnapped kids. And people are like, oh, wow. And then they go back into their lives and then they forget. And a movie like Sound of Freedom comes out and now everybody wants to go be door kickers. And they're just not. And it's just like, so that's why I've shifted heavily into education. So we have an online school called Disruptors University. And that's also why I decided it was time for a conference. Because like I can host motorcycle rallies all day long and raise funds. Like, but if people don't learn about it, I'm like disturbed by that. I feel like I'm not doing as much as I could. And so I hosted a conference this March in Southern Oregon, and it was for community members. And it's pretty unique because most trafficking conferences are for service providers, counselors, law enforcement. Like you're educating the people who are like providing services to victims and survivors. This conference is just for community members.
What a great approach.
Yeah, because it's like I want Jackson County, Southern Oregon, to be eventually a beacon of like, yeah, we don't tolerate that shit here. Like as a community, we're educated, we're advocating, we understand how this looks, we know what policy to vote for, and we're not putting up with this. Like that's my dream. And so it just started with a conference. Now we're already planning next year, and it was cool.
How many people came?
Like over 200 people both days.
Wow.
I know. Blew me away. I was like, man, if we get 100 people, I'll just be like so stoked. And we brought in like top level speakers, a lot of survivor leaders. Rebecca was the keynote. I have a survivor on my board, survivor of familial trafficking. We brought in the Department of Justice, our local Jackson County Coalition Against Sex Trafficking. Yeah.
Wow.
It was great. It was 2 days of just like, hey, this is how this happens, and it's not how you think it happens. And then what was cool is that I brought in 16 service providers from the community because Rebecca Bender gave this great TED Talk on her TED Talk. She's talking about like, you know, combating these misconceptions of kidnapping and et cetera. Like if you really want to support victims and you really want to make a difference, you need to look at the vulnerabilities that cause someone to be trafficked. And we're talking poverty, we're talking child abuse, neglect, single moms, teen moms, right? Like what are the vulnerabilities? Food insecurity, houselessness, right?
Yeah.
All of those vulnerabilities make trafficking possible. And so if you want to really combat human trafficking in your community, look to the people who are vulnerable and support them. And so for my conference, we brought in 16 service providers, people that help LGBTQI youth, organizations like CASA that work in the foster care system, domestic violence. We brought in 16 local agencies. And from the very beginning of the conference, I said that we had a quote from Rebecca Bender about supporting local vulnerable populations. And I said, you're going to learn about trafficking, but you're going to actually learn like how to combat it. And that's by supporting your people who are already here in this community doing this work. And so at the end of day 2, we had basically like, it's called like an offers and needs market where every org got up and had 2 minutes to say like, this is where we need support from you guys. And then we had everybody in the audience make lists of what they could offer. Like maybe they're good at making quilts. Maybe they're good at fundraising. Maybe they're like really good at Excel spreadsheets. And so connecting their skills with the orgs and what they need. And then we just said, go. Like you have 30 minutes to go fill a need. And we asked for a 100% participation.
Wow.
So everybody in the crowd, like some orgs just said, we really just need people to join our e-newsletter. Like that's easy enough.
Yeah, here's my email.
250 of you guys should go do that. Like, So we tried to connect needs with skills and abilities from the community and let people know that, like, yeah, when you support a foster kid, you're reducing their chances of being trafficked. Like, it's not complicated. But everybody wants to look out for kidnapped kids, right? So this is the problem.
Right.
Let's fix that problem.
It's really fascinating hearing you talk about all this. Because, again, I was under the impression it was like van pulls up, dudes jump out, person's gone.
Not that that doesn't happen.
No, it definitely does. But I was under the impression that was most of it,
So when we think about human trafficking, we have to think of it as a business system.
Yeah.
They have supply, demand, marketing, and kidnapped people are not marketable. Sure, there might be a small percentage of sex buyers that, like, that's their thing, but mostly it's not. Yeah. Mostly sex buyers are into the girlfriend experience. They want her to be beautiful. They want her to pay attention to him. They want that affection. They want someone to listen, right? That's marketable. That whole, like, Las Vegas thing.
Yeah.
Those people aren't kidnapped. Because how's that sexy for most sex buyers? It's not. So what pimps do is they coerce, groom, turn a girl out, slowly expand the boundaries, turn a girl out, which means sending them into prostitution. And then that's the story. And then sex buyers are like, well, she wants to be here. It's like, well, yeah, because if she doesn't pretend like she wants to be here, she's going to get, like, whooped.
Yeah.
Like, there's very severe consequences. And so when you think about, like, oh, that makes sense, right? Because how many sex buyers actually want to go, like, do that with someone who's locked in a cage and who, like that's not sexy. Right.
Yeah.
What's sexy is the girlfriend experience. It's like really hot chick who's, like, giving me attention, right? So when we look at prostitution in this country, that's primarily human trafficking. Because if a prostituted person has a pimp, which we think like 9 out of 10 prostituted people have pimps, right? And we know that. Like, that's the whole story. Like, oh, she got pimp slapped, like this, that, right?
Yeah.
If 9 out of 10 prostituted people have pimps, and in the eyes of the law, a pimp is a trafficker, they control the comings and goings, they control the money, the identification, they don't have access to their own bank accounts. They can't come and go as they please. They have quotas that they have to fill that are enforced with severe physical violence and often murder. Like, that's trafficking. And we have a whole community of men in this country that are directly supporting human trafficking by buying sex, by buying commercial sex.
That's horrible.
I mean, we talk a lot about traffickers, right? Like, oh, well, if we just locked up all the traffickers, this problem would go away. No. This is a supply and demand business that is driven by demand. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry in our country, and it is driven by upper middle class, white, married American men. And nobody wants to talk about that. We want to talk about the vans and the zip ties on the gas station. Like, right. This is a demand issue. And this is why I love you guys. Like, I love you guys and Critter, and, like, what you're talking about in men's mental health is the key. Because men who buy sex are lost. They're lonely. They're isolated. Like, yes, they need to be held accountable for the harm that they're causing, but they're not okay.
I think you're very spot on with that one.
Yeah, we know it. I know it from my work at Epik Project. So my work at Epik Project, they're men fighting trafficking. They've been 13 years intercepting sex buys at the point of sale. So they've talked to hundreds of thousands of sex buyers at the point of sale, men who are calling in to buy sex. And they have conversations like, in the beginning, it was like, hey, do you know the harm you're causing? Like, sort of shame-based. And then survivors taught them, you're never going to get through. And we know, like, from Brene Brown and stuff, like, shame doesn't work. Shame doesn't change behavior. Shame makes you go further into your darkness or whatever. So they shifted to more like, hey, can I ask, like, what got you here tonight? Like, how'd you end up here calling this ad to buy sex from Stephanie? And they've had what is fascinating conversations.
That sounds fat. Are they recording them, or are they just?
They take notes, and a lot of it's text thread, and those are recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the studies done on sex buyers. 80% of American men will never buy sex, which is so encouraging. There's so many good men out there. Like, we never want to lose sight of that. And I certainly don't. I'm surrounded by amazing, incredible men. 20% of men who will purchase sex in their lifetime, of that 20%, 80% say that they buy sex because they think it's a normal part of masculinity.
What?
Yeah, this is a masculinity issue. Human trafficking. They think like they have, when polled, say like, well, I buy sex because it's part of being a man. It's my right. It's my, like, and most of them, their first experience was because another man bought them that experience. So it's like, you buy your kid a prostitute for his 21st birthday or whatever. Like, they learned it from the men in their lives. And so, like, another real solution, apart from just supporting vulnerable populations, is talking to this is a men's issue. Like, everybody always says, how do I keep my daughter safe? And we're always like, talk to your sons. Like, how are we nurturing the next generation of boys to not become sex buyers? That's what we do at Epik Project. So talk to the men in your lives. Like, have these conversations, from pornography all the way up to purchasing sex. Like, it's all interlinked. And it is driving the most horrific black market crime in our country. The most severe, horrible treatment of women and children and men and boys too. But it's like at the surface, it's like not that complicated. It's actually very complex, but like that's what we're dealing with here.
I don't even know what to say on some of that, because you're saying a lot of things I'm just a little dumbfounded on, the numbers and all of that, and I can't imagine, as a father of two boys, the last thing I would ever want to do was buy them a prostitute for the night or an hour or whatever. I couldn't even imagine that.
But it happens. It happens. I mean, it's even like my favorite TV show, New Girl. It's like so dumb and so fun. There's an episode in there where, I don't know who watches the show, but yeah, like they're all talking about like their stories of when they lost their virginities and stuff. Mm-hmm. The character Nick Miller, his dad, like bought him a lady of the night, they called it, and it was like so funny and whatever. And I'm just like, okay, like culturally, this is not that out there. Like this, it happens a lot. Men learn this behavior from other men,
right? And
so it's men that need to start having these conversations. Like, I'm sure you were just telling me about your niece, right? Like, you've had these conversations on how to keep your nieces safe, but have you ever talked to your sons about, like, maybe don't go to the strip club, like maybe, like, what's going on with your porn consumption habits? Like, those are the conversations, not the conversations of teaching your nieces and daughters how to, like, walk with their keys in their hands, like things women, we all do. Not the conversations about, like, okay, not those conversations. We should be having those conversations about self-defense and stuff. But the conversations that are going to actually shift the needle are with your sons, your friends, your male circles, your circle of influences, your nephews. That's where we shift the needle. Because at some point, boys are being introduced to pornography. Right now, the average age is 8.
Yeah.
First exposure to porn is 8 years old.
I thought it was 7 when you first were bringing that up.
Yeah. It's around there. Uh-huh. And it's like, we have to be paying attention to that.
Kind of a test to that is I found myself giggling, but I guess it was actually a more serious deal. I remember I was going down the road, and this car kind of was alongside me for a minute, long enough to where you kind of like look down, again, you're in the semi truck, so everybody's lower than you, and you have a pretty good view of shenanigans. But there was this kid, young, I would say 12 at the most, 12 at the most.
Oh, please don't tell me he was watching porn in the back seat.
He was watching porn in the back seat. He was kitty cornered in the back seat, and I was looking at it. Just going around, mom and dad in the front, somebody on the other side.
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and he was clearly watching porn as we were going down the road.
This is like, that boy's life is forever altered. You cannot be exposed to pornography at that age and not have it have severe consequences to your life. And this is like an experiment for humanity, because like your generation, you had maybe some nudie mags you could peep, you know?
Yeah.
That's not the same as being exposed to hardcore smut. And like the percentages of pornography, I think it's like, don't quote me, it's like high 90% of pornography exhibits violence towards women. The choking, the slapping, the strangling, like that's norm. That's normal now. What's that doing to our young boys?
Right.
There's been a really big increase in youth on youth sexual assault. Like the biggest sexual assault cases now, or the most like common that ER nurses are seeing, is children being sexually assaulted by their peers, and they're acting out what they're seeing in pornography.
I think it probably does a flip to the girls too, because the girls are witnessing it and they're like, oh, I have to be choked out.
I have to be choked. I have to perform in this way. It's like, it's not cool. Like, I don't even know how to express deep enough, like what an issue this is going to be for us, what an issue it is for us. And sex buyers, when polled, also say 100% of them are addicted to porn. Like this is an escalating behavior. So if you're already watching hardcore smut, which is what these kids are being exposed to, you think they're just going to be like exposed to like consensual softcore porn. That's not what's happening to these 8, 7, 9-year-old kids. Like it's hardcore strangling, smut, beatings, gang rapes. Like that's what's out there, right? So you think about that, your brain gets addicted to that. It's like more addictive than like cocaine. Like the studies on neuroscience and pornography will like knock your socks off. Like this isn't like some moralistic crusade. Like this is neuroscience, and it's an escalating behavior. So if you watch porn and then suddenly that one's not doing it for you, so you got to look for maybe something a little more whatever extreme, and then more extreme, and then years go by, and now you can't have regular relationships. You have ED. You can't the mechanism that allows you to attach to another human being is broken. It's like severed. And so then you start saying like, well, the porn's not doing it for me anymore. Maybe I'll call an escort. Like it's an escalating behavior, and it's like, it's not.
One of the most disappointing things about that whole thing that you were just talking about is where you have to escalate and escalate and escalate and escalate, and then you miss that connection with your partner.
Yeah.
Which is probably one of the absolute most powerful things in life, is to have somebody like that in your life where you guys are actually connecting. And if you can't have that kind of relationship, man,
But that's what porn does.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not, I'm not just saying that. Like, that's why I said, like, this is science. Like, this is what's happening. And there's some great resources out there. But that's another thing. Like, we talk about, there's this organization called Exodus Cry, which is a whole nother story because they're taking down Pornhub. The founder, Benji Nolo, he talks a lot about, like, the roots of human trafficking, are these things, but the soil is pornography. Like, we wouldn't have human trafficking where we have it today if it weren't for pornography and, like, the ground that it's laying. And I encourage every man, every person, to really consider their porn habits. Because first of all, there is no way of knowing it's consensual or if they're underage.
Right.
Or if they were coerced, or what's going on behind the camera. And I've photographed and met hundreds of survivors. They were almost all exploited at some point in pornography. And it's like, you have to really think about, like, if you know that and you still get turned on, Like maybe it's time to rethink this habit and like do some serious soul searching, because the percentage of porn that's why Pornhub is going down right now. Like they had to scrub 80% of their content overnight because these lawsuits that were coming out and the media that was coming out, because they knew that they knew that this stuff was trafficking, that this stuff was child sexual abuse material, that it was rapes, and they didn't there's the internal documents was like, well, they would take it down, it would pop back up because it's a tube site where anybody can upload. So even if they take it down, it just gets re-uploaded, and they didn't care. And it's a huge court cases right now. Now they've pulled out of 5 different states because of age verification laws. Like they're finally being held accountable. But I think at an individual level, I would ask people to really seriously consider, what are you contributing to? And what are you doing to your own brain?
That's definitely pretty powerful, for sure.
And there's all these arguments for ethical porn and all of this, but you can't ever know that. So Exodus Cry, they have a couple of videos, video series and movies. Actually, they have films on Netflix and everything. I encourage people, if you find yourself disagreeing with me or thinking oh, well, it's not that bad, or, oh, well, you're not watching the right kind, or you're not, it actually, there is ethical porn out there. I would encourage you to check out these video series it's real behind the scenes. They sit down with porn producers and actors, and it will make you sick to your stomach. And it's just it's directly linked to human trafficking in our country. And so that's, again, why it's so frustrating when people watch movies like The Sound of Freedom and they think, oh, we just need to kick down the doors. And it's no, the actual solution is in your hands in a completely different way. But it's hard because then we have to take a hard look at ourselves. We have to take a hard look at our porn consumption. We have to take a hard look at our, the men in our lives, and have to say okay, who's sex buyers here? I walk into a restaurant and I'm 20% of these men are sex buyers. Changes things.
That's a crazy way to look at it when you walk in like that.
I mean, that's the statistics, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we know the makeup of sex buyers is they're just average, everyday American good men. I wrote a blog post about this recently called how do we know what is a good man? Because how many good men do you know who are contributing to this?
Right.
What's a good man? I wrote a whole blog post on it. You had to check it out. You can put it in the show notes.
We'll put it in the show notes for sure.
Yeah.
Just send it my way. Absolutely. So what's next for you guys?
I think I'm this close to getting our next Survivor bike, the bikes that we customize and raffle off. So hopefully news coming soon about that. I am doing another conference in the spring.
Okay.
Back in Southern Oregon. And then, at Epik Project, we are getting ready to launch a hub for men. So we have the podcast. Mm-hmm. It's called The Masculine Wilderness. And it discusses a lot of these issues that I'm talking to you about now. It's if human trafficking is a masculinity issue, what does that mean? And what does that look like? And what's the path forward? And so we have a whole podcast on that. I produce it. I'm not the host. The host is my charity partner and boss, Tom Perez, founder of Epik Project. And we have had some pretty crazy guests on there. Our first guest was Elizabeth Smart. Do you remember her? She actually was kidnapped. She wasn't trafficked, but she was kidnapped out of her home in Utah.
I do remember that name now.
She was missing for 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really fascinating interview with her.
That was your first guest.
It's our first guest. Yeah.
Coming out strong, I guess, right?
I know. And we've had our next guest is Andrea Hines. She is a formal, I guess she would say, self-proclaimed sex worker and brothel owner in Canada.
Okay.
She's now one of the fiercest advocates for the abolition of the sex trade. And that's a really fascinating interview.
I can
that
only
will
imagine.
blow your mind.
Yeah. I'll have to put the link to that, to those podcasts down in the show notes.
Yep. In the show notes.
Yes.
I don't know why I keep whispering it.
It just makes it even better. It's the show notes.
The show notes.
It's awesome. So how long, you've only done 2 episodes now of that? Or is there a
We're on
lot?
11. We're on 11.
Oh, nice.
We're new. We started in January.
Mm-hmm. You're doing a lot more than I am. This is 18.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
But you have to have people in studio. We can do them virtually, so it's a lot easier.
I've done a few virtual ones as well. I dislike them.
Yeah.
I more prefer, like we could have done this a year ago.
Yeah.
Right. But I prefer in studio because the interaction, the body language, and it's a more comfortable conversation.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like we were talking about earlier, like the program that I use, you know, like we did a thing last week and Critter was on and he like froze, you know, it's like, no, it'll download right. But it's that awkward moment, like where maybe they might disappear and you're like,
you're like, do I just continue on speaking or?
And you're back.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi. You know, but they don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, in studio is always more gooder, but definitely somebody like that, you know, and I did like Misty Hurst, I think, you know, virtual and stuff and a few other people, but, you know, open up your horizons, right?
Yeah.
Be able to get more guests and stuff, but eventually I wouldn't mind flying some people in. There's a couple people I'm looking at to get in here.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just did a virtual one with a guy in D.C. who I actually I saw a documentary on Andrew Tate. You know about Andrew Tate?
Boy, you're throwing out a lot of names there. I'm like, okay, I think I know.
He's an influencer in the manosphere is what it's called. And it's just kind of, it's like alpha bros. But basically he was like the most followed figure on TikTok.
Okay.
Yeah. And he like mentors young men on how to be like men and how to get nice cars and how to get women. And he basically escalated to how to be a pimp, like how to sex traffic women. And he has a school online called the PhD, which is the Pimp and Hose degree. And he's not been shy about this. And he teaches you how to, in theory, how to get your first woman and then groom her and then flip her to do webcamming. But you have he lays it out. We call it Romeo pimping, which is kind of what I was describing earlier, where they pretend to be in a relationship with you. He very clearly says you got to pretend to be in love with them. It's like, that's fucking Romeo pimp. He's not even trying to hide it. You have to make her think that you fall in love with her. You have to have sex with her. It won't work if you don't have sex with her, because that's when she's bonded to you. This is what pimps do. And then you turn her out, and then she has to give you all her money from webcamming. And then he teaches beyond that, how to have a stable of women. This is this is human trafficking. And he's the most watched, followed guy on TikTok for young men. And so, long story short, he's been arrested for human trafficking in Romania. He's fighting it. He says they're stomping on his freedoms and blah, blah, blah. But he has real influence with young men in this country, real influence. And it's terrifying, honestly. He's the stuff he says just makes you want to ugh. Anyways, we had a guest on our podcast who is an expert in this, and he does online male extremism. He has a PhD at American University on online extremism for incels and the manosphere and the Andrew Tates. And so I saw him on a documentary about Andrew Tate, and I was like, I gotta get that guy on. So I contacted him on LinkedIn, and he said yes. And that episode just came out this morning.
Oh, wow.
And it is, again, so fucking fascinating, especially when we're talking about these issues of addressing this issue in young men, as opposed to let's just kick down doors and crawl through the jungle. Real solutions versus Hollywood stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, I don't even know if I'm going to use this right. The manosphere. I think when you're young, that's kind of the view that you're pointed at. You know, well, you want the car, you want the chicks, and all that.
For sure. I mean, He's exploiting vulnerability in young men.
Yeah.
And we need better men to continue to fill that void.
Absolutely.
Like and like, you're a dad, like, like just ask your kids, hey, what do you think about Andrew Tate? You ever been listening to him? Start the conversation. Because guaranteed they know who he is.
Yeah, probably.
And then it's like, even my dad, because Andrew Tate was on Tucker Carlson, and like, it was just like,
really?
It was this crazy thing where Tucker Carlson was so sympathetic to him. Like, oh my gosh, like that's horrible. I can't believe that happened to you. Like, what was it like being in prison? Like, it was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. And that was my dad's first introduction to Andrew Tate. And he's like telling me about it. And I was like, Dad, no, like, no. And I sent him some clips of Andrew Tate actually like teaching people how to like, and he's like, oh wow, I would have never gotten that from that Tucker Carlson interview. I'm just like, what reality are we living in? Like,
yeah, that kind of surprises me.
My dad's very involved with my work, and he's always on the up and up of what I'm doing, and he didn't know. And I'm just like, it's like just like duping people or something. Like, we need to talk about these things. So having those conversations with your kids, like, hey, you know about this figure, this guy, like, what do you think about him?
Yeah, I wish I had this conversation with you a decade ago.
It's not too late.
Right.
It's definitely not too late. But yeah, if you've got young boys, like, you need to be having these conversations now.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it, because, my kids were in high school, and it was just different. It was just like...
It's different.
And I think it goes back to that whole thing too,
Mm-hmm.
If a lady sleeps with 10 girls, or, well, maybe. If a lady sleeps with 10 guys, or a guy sleeps with 10 girls, which one's the cool one?
Yeah.
Right.
For sure. And again, I'm going to say it. That's why I love, like, your podcast and what Critter's doing, because, like, supporting men, like, loving men. And I said this, like, I say this on our podcast when I was on, like, I wish men could feel how much women love them. Because, like, in my own experience, in my marriage and in my relation, like, I just, like, love these guys, and they just can't accept it. And, like, I think so much goes wrong because men they haven't been provided an environment where they can feel lovable.
We haven't been provided a environment where we can be vulnerable.
Same thing.
I think it's a little different.
Okay.
I do. I think we can feel the love and stuff, and I think we can kind of accept it, but we don't have an environment where it's okay to really express that.
Yeah.
We don't have an environment to where, growing up, especially in, the Gen X, everybody's just like, deal with it, kid, you're fine.
Yeah.
And push it down. But when you're not, you don't have the resources to go out and be vulnerable with somebody. Yeah. It's hard to, as a man, not now because I'm getting over all this crap, but it's like, you can't cry in front of people. Like, you're weak. You can't do that. That's weakness. You have to be strong, right? And so I think, at least from my perception, I definitely feel like we feel the love from the women.
Okay.
Or for our ladies or wives or whatever.
But do you feel worthy of it is kind of my question. Because if you feel like I can't be vulnerable, therefore I'm not really being seen. So yeah, she loves me, but she doesn't really love the real me because I can't show it to her. Like, yeah,
I think that's kind of, we're kind of blending it, and I think sometimes it's really hard to be, overly affectionate, like maybe how you want to be. I think it's easy to say I love you, but it's hard to say I love you, right?
Like, I love you, yeah.
Like, sometimes you say that and they're just 3 words.
Yeah.
But other times it's like, I'm saying that, but it's my heart is saying that. And I need you to understand right now, right? So I think it's just like that whole, like you're saying, the manosphere, and this social construction of what we've become over the years, to now. And it's not like, I do think a man has to be strong.
Sure.
You know, I think a man has to be the point of being. Jordan Peterson said, and I kind of agree with the point of, a man has to be dangerous, right? But you have to know you can be dangerous, but that also has to be over here on the side. If you need that, it's over here. But how do we take the man being, you know, quote unquote dangerous to being super open and vulnerable with not only the person you're spending your life with, but your friend group, society, your neighborhood, your city, and just being okay with whatever emotion you're having at the time. And unfortunately, that's not something we're really at the moment.
Yeah.
You know, so you're trying to push that out, and it comes back, and it's kind of the same thing, you know. And I've been called a cancery cancer because I'm like, oh, I love you or whatever, you know. And then it's just like, you try to do that with other people or in a different environment, and people are just like, what the fuck's wrong with you, man?
Yeah.
Tone that stuff back. You're making me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, why?
Yeah.
You know, and it's to this day, if you ever watch me interact with my friends, like if you're in my inner circle, I love you.
Yeah.
I don't care. And I'm going to hang up the phone with, like, you know, I'll say that to Critter or Sean or whoever. I'm like, I love you, man.
Yeah.
And the reactions of these guys are like, all right, man, see ya. You know, it's like they're just not used to that. And it was just very recently, you know, Critter was like, yeah, I love you too, bro. Okay, bye. You know, so it's just like, why is that weird?
Yeah.
You know, and my dad and I didn't say I love you until I was in my 40s.
Wow.
And I started telling him, all right, man, love you. And he was like, I love you too.
Wow.
You know, that hesitation. I say it to my boys all the time.
See, this
from
is
day
progress.
one. It is. It is. I try to be very, I am not the perfect dad, but I do try to let them know it's okay to say that and stuff. And even like, I was coaching high school football, and my son was he came through the high school while I was there, you know, and it's really funny because it would just be normal. I'll be walking down the sideline, and he'd come off, and I'd be like, "That's a great play, kid." He's like, "Thanks, Dad." I'd be like, "Man, I love you." And he's like, "I love you too."
Yeah.
You know, I don't care.
Yeah.
You know, but
That's sweet. Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of what I'm talking about. Like, we have an opportunity with this next generation, but we have to be having those conversations and saying those things and making them feel seen. Because if you can't let somebody be vulnerable, then they don't feel seen. And when they don't feel seen, they act those out with prostituted people.
Yeah.
That's one way.
Yeah, that's just,
I know. It's wild.
yeah, I really admire the steps you've taken and what you're doing. You know, like I said, since I started really kind of, you know, knowing about you and meeting you and stuff, I've always talked about you on the backside, just being like, she's a really impressive woman.
Oh, thank you.
You know, like very, it's more than just a nonprofit. It's just you as a character, you know, and I think that really kind of struck me as just our conversation for the first time in Hot Springs.
In the hot
you know, you know, it was, it was a good conversation, and it's just been something where I've been following you a lot more, you know, ever since then, and just watching. And sometimes I'll go through the story, and sometimes you go through stories on Instagram like, tick, 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 tick. And then I'm like, wait, I have to go back, and then you got to go to your profile, and then you got to click on it again, and be like, oh, okay, that is what's going on. Yeah, I think it's pretty amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just one day at a time in it, you know. I have a vision of things that I want to do and where I want to be, and I get a lot of support.
Yeah, I bet.
My family is really dear to me, and my family has a farm, and I live there. And I don't think I could do this work if I didn't live there. It's like a respite and like a healing place, and I have such a great community in motorcycling and in anti-trafficking, and great friends, and so I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful for where I'm at and what I've been through.
That's yeah, I see some of those pictures from the farm, and I'm just like,
I know, it's magical.
It is.
Yeah.
And you take some very creative pictures. I'm like, gosh, I wish I could figure something like that out.
It's the photographer in me.
Right?
Yeah.
Just, it's amazing. It does seem like, you know, a place of nature.
It is.
You know?
Very healing energies. Yeah.
I think that's pretty freaking rad.
Mm-hmm.
We always have a place here and a platform here. If you ever want to do anything, come back. We can do one virtual if you want, or whatever,
Thank you.
And I think we've been going for 243. And you do have to get on your motorcycle and ride back to Southern Oregon.
Mm-hmm. I have, 300 miles?
250-ish.
50?
Yeah.
Not bad. I'll be closing out I've been on the road 9 or 10 days.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is just awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anybody you want to shout out real quick?
Oh, man. I mean, I guess, if you want to learn more about trafficking, reach out to me. I can send some resources your way. Check out Epik Project and our podcast, the Masculine Wilderness Podcast, anywhere you listen to podcasts.
And we'll put those in the
show notes. Show notes.
Absolutely.
That was a whisper echo.
Yeah, it was. I think that's pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but thank you for the time and for the platform too, and let me talk about all that stuff. You did say it would fly by, and it definitely flew by.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes people will look and like 30 minutes and then like 243. Where did that go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool because we can go wherever it takes us.
Yeah. Well, that's the main reason I wanted to do a long form. It's just because if we're in a great conversation, we have an hour cap. Okay, we'll see you next time. Yeah. You know, I like just things to be organic and natural. And if the conversation's flowing, let's just keep going.
Yeah.
Right.
Good
So,
stuff.
absolutely.
So do we get to go eat pancakes now?
Well, I can make you some pancakes if you really want.
This is why I really came.
That's right. Absolutely. All right. Well, with that, I guess we'll just go ahead and close it all out.
Okay, thank you, Ian.
Thanks again.
Thanks.
Yep.